Good morning. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. That's crazy.
There's more of beautiful embracing Brid on the way. When it's me versus the waves. Oh, here we go. Let's cut to the chase. Interceptors are on the case.
BBC.
Live from Washington, this is BBC News. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan calls for unity after victory in a presidential election runoff secures him another 5 years in office. With a deal to raise the US debt ceiling secured, the countdown is on to get the bill past a deeply divided Congress.
The agreement also represents a compromise, which means no one got everything they want. I strongly urge both chambers to pass that agreement.
And one night after Russia's largest drone attack on Kyiv, Ukrainian air defenses shoot down dozens more Russian targets over the capital. I'm Helena Humphrey. Great to have you with us. We begin in Turkey, where Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been declared the winner of his country's presidential runoff in a closely fought election seen as the most important for Turkey in years. Now, there were joyous scenes on the streets of Istanbul as Mr. Erdogan celebrated with his supporters after winning around 52% of the vote. The 69-year-old will now serve another 5 years in office, potentially stretching his time in power to a quarter of a century. Addressing a jubilant crowd, President Erdogan promised to build a strong economy and called for unity. Meanwhile, his opponent, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, said it was the most unfair election in years and that he felt saddened by the troubles awaiting Turkey. Our senior international correspondent, Orna Guerin, reports from the Turkish capital, Ankara.
The Recep Tayyip Erdogan juggernaut rolls on. And tonight in the Turkish capital, the streets belong to his supporters, who have stuck with him through thick and thin and hyperinflation.
We are blessed that our president is leading us again. There is no better feeling than this. Let the world hear it. He is the leader who has taught the entire world a lesson.
And here he was, serenading supporters, or trying to, from a bus top near his home in Istanbul. having beaten off the biggest challenge in years. The only winner, he said, is Turkey, before stoking divisions with an attack on the opposition and the LGBTQ community. Earlier, he handed out cash outside a polling station like a modern-day sultan, one who has now extended his reign for another 5 years. His rival, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, ran as Mr. Nice Guy, but then veered right, vowing to send all refugees home. Supporters chanting his slogan today, "Everything will be beautiful." "He's our hope," she told us. Now defeated, he says he fears much bigger troubles are ahead for Turkey. The choice here was stark, two very different options, a seasoned autocrat or an untested democrat. Most voters went with the devil they know. The process is carried out very carefully here. You have to arrive with a voting slip and with your ID. Your name is checked on the list, and after you vote, you sign that you have done so. There are observers here too from all the political parties, but President Erdogan has gone into this contest with key advantages, not least almost total control of the media. Özcan Akar, a retired lawyer of 90, came out to vote for change.
Halen diktatöryal bir rejim var.
In Turkey, currently, there's a dictatorial regime. I am voting to return to democracy.
En başta
First of all, there is no justice. The president holds executive and legislative powers. This is the biggest mistake.
başkanın emrinde.
But tonight, packed victory celebrations outside the presidential palace of 1,000 rooms. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is newly emboldened. The opposition is badly bruised, and this strategic nation has chosen its path.
Well, Matthew Breiser joins me now. He is a former US ambassador and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasia with responsibility for Turkey, among other countries. And he joins us from Istanbul. Welcome to you, Matthew. Good to see you once again. So firstly, we've seen some speedy congratulations from US President Joe Biden, sentiments echoed as well from UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, both emphasising the fact that Turkey, of course, has this relationship as NATO partners as well. What do you make of that?
Yeah, thanks, Helena, for having me with you. Well, I mean, it makes sense because this was a free election. People would argue whether or not it was fair because, as in the package just now was described, the government in power has so many advantages, economic advantages and media advantages. But at the end of the day, Turkey remains not only a NATO member state, but the NATO member state with its second largest military and a really quite compellingly important strategic position on the map. You know, obviously, if you look at the map, you see that Turkey borders Syria, Iraq, Iran, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and then in the north, across the Black Sea, Russia, Ukraine, and then Bulgaria, as well as Greece and Romania. So it's such a consequential member of NATO that after a democratic election, even if you argue that it wasn't fair, but it was free, there's no choice but for Prime Minister Sunak and President Biden to get on with things.
We're talking about it being so consequential for NATO. Of course, Turkey's support will be critical in seeing Sweden join NATO. Do you see President Erdogan giving the green light here?
I actually do. I mean, maybe I'm just being optimistic. As a former diplomat, I always needed to be optimistic, but I do see that. I think that maybe President Erdogan was holding back and playing the nationalist card with regard to Sweden's membership in NATO because of the approaching election. And if you go back to your package, even his opponent, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, in the second round of the election, played the nationalist card by calling for the expulsion of all of the 3.7 million Syrian refugees who have come to Turkey since 2011. And so I think at the end of the day, yes, I think Erdogan will relent. His government has been one of the staunchest supporters of NATO enlargement, meaning, of course, first and foremost, the eventual membership of Ukraine and of Georgia. So I think he will relent, but he'll also want to exact his additional pounds of flesh. And while I'm optimistic, I'm not deterministic. He has been demanding that the Swedish government or Sweden return suspects of terrorist groups, the PKK or the Fethullah Gülen organization, which is deemed terrorist here in Turkey. And as the Swedish government has said, is we, the executive branch, cannot do that unless we get a court decision. And it's not guaranteed the courts will decide on extradition. So Erdogan will have to decide at the end of the day what he does. But I think he will decide to let Sweden in.
You were just mentioning as well there the fate of Syrian refugees in the country, a topic which was a big talking point, as you say, for the opposition there as well, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, in the last 2 weeks. But what do you think this victory for Erdogan now means for Syrians, particularly for Syrians in the north of the country, particularly at a time when we've also seen the Arab League essentially appearing welcome al-Assad back into the fold?
I think it will, with Erdogan having won again, the refugees can sleep a little bit more quietly because the thought of them being forcibly expelled back to Syria is no longer operative, which it would have been, as you said, Helena, if Kılıçdaroğlu won. And for a few years, Erdogan has been saying that Turkey wants to build a safe zone in northern Syria so that Syrian refugees can return voluntarily. I hope that's still the policy. I see no reason why that would have changed after Erdogan's views overall won in the election. And still, at the end, as you say, much will depend upon how or whether there's a normalization or an improvement of relations between Ankara and Damascus. In recent months, the Turkish government has suggested has been trying to improve relations with Assad, possibly normalize relations. And Turkey's been doing that, in fact, with all of its neighbors to the south, with Egypt, with Saudi Arabia to the southeast, with the United Arab Emirates, even with Israel and with Armenia. And so I think that process will continue with Syria, but it's not clear it's going to get to a point where I think Erdogan will say, okay, the safe zone is safe enough for the refugees to return.
And I want to talk a little bit about his relationship with both the Ukrainian President Zelensky and Russia's President Putin. You know, he has been walking this remarkable tightrope act, essentially. Do you think that he will be able to continue to do that? Or do you think potentially other partners, other countries could force his hand a little bit more and say, we need you to come down on one side?
Yeah, as a former U.S. diplomat and a pro-NATO Cold Warrior, I would love to see Turkey come in on the side of imposing the sanctions everybody else has imposed on Russia. But he won't. He won't, and neither would have Kılıçdaroğlu had he won, for structural reasons. Turkey has such deep, not just deep economic interests with Russia, lots of exports in terms of agricultural goods or Russians coming to Turkey, or energy interests with Turkey receiving lots of natural gas from Russia, and Russia essentially paying for a $20 billion atomic energy plant in Turkey. But every Turk knows that throughout the history of Turkey going into the Ottoman Empire and the Russian Empire, Turkey's fought more wars against Russia than against any other country. So Erdogan will want to continue having open communications with Putin, so that Turkey can do things like broker the grain agreement that has allowed, thank goodness, the avoidance of fears of famine in the global south. But at the same time, again, Turkey has fought more wars against Russia than any other country going back to the imperial days. So I think we're going to also continue seeing strong support for Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty, and military technological support for Ukraine as well.
All right, Matthew Breiser there, a former US ambassador, also the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasia. Great to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena.
the US, and after weeks of negotiations, President Joe Biden and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy have finalized a deal to raise the national debt ceiling. A short time ago, the bill was released. So let's start with a few key details. Well, the agreement will lift the debt limit until January 1st, 2025. Congress allocated an additional $86 billion for security spending while decreasing non-defense spending by over $200 billion. There is still work to be done, though, and we'll get more on that shortly. But earlier, President Biden shared his thoughts on the day's developments.
We've reached a bipartisan budget agreement that we're ready to move to the full Congress. And I think it's a really important step forward, and it takes the threat of catastrophic default off the table, protects our hard-earned and historic economic recovery. And the agreement also represents a compromise, which means no one got everything they want. But that's the responsibility of governing. And this deal is good news for, I believe, you'll see, for the American people. The agreement prevents the worst possible crisis, a default, for the first time in our nation's history.
Well, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy will need to convince members of his Republican Party to back the bill, and he spoke to Fox News on Sunday.
95% of all those in the conference were very excited. But think about this. We finally were able to cut spending. We're the first Congress to vote for cutting spending year over year. We were able to do this when the president said he wasn't even going to talk to us. This is really a step in the right direction. It puts a trajectory that's different. We put a statutory cap on only spending 1% for the next 6 years. So we let government grow, but at a slower rate.
Crucially, this deal still needs to be approved by both parts of a divided Congress, and overall there are 435 votes in the House of Representatives. In order to advance a bill to the US Senate, it will need the support of the majority, or 218 members, and currently House Republicans, well, they control the lower chamber of Congress with 222 votes. Members of the more conservative Freedom Caucus in the House have opposed raising the debt ceiling, and currently they have 45 votes in the House. Now, that was the lower house, but of course the bill will also need to pass the upper house, the Senate. It takes 60 votes to advance a bill to President Biden's desk, and Democrats control the Senate with 51 votes. Now, around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
Feeling on top of the world, this is the moment Harry made history. Last week, he became the first ever double above-the-knee amputee to reach the summit of Everest.
I'm emotional as well because it's long wait, and I cried many times, and yeah, lots of emotional things. So yeah, I think I feel amazing, but also I hope this will send a message to around the world that anything is possible.
The former Gurkha soldier lost both his legs when he stepped on an improvised explosive device while serving in Afghanistan in 2010. When he woke up, he thought his life was over, but taking on a number of extreme sporting feats helped grow his confidence again.
You're live with BBC News. In the last hour, military officials in Kyiv say that they have destroyed more than 40 air targets that were heading to the city, including drones and missiles. Now, yesterday, in one of Russia's largest attacks on Kyiv, out of 59 drones, 58 were shot down, but 2 people were killed in the attack. Tonight is the 15th aerial bombardment on the Ukrainian capital this month. For more on this, I spoke to Ukrainian MP Alexei Goncharенko. Hello, Russia carried out a massive drone attack on Kyiv overnight. Tell us about what happened and the aftermath.
Yeah, it was the day of Kiev, and that was kind of congratulation of Russia to Kiev, to the capital of Ukraine. And again, a new attack, the biggest drone attack from the beginning of invasion. Again, we saw that civilian infrastructure was hurt partly because almost all the drones were intercepted, but the rest of them, they fall on the civilian areas and houses. One person is killed and a number are injured. That's again continuation of Russian policy of a terror against civilians throughout the whole country and especially in the capital of the country, Kiev.
And I want to touch on the psychological impact of this war as well, because you mentioned there the use of drones, and even if they are shot down by a bolstered Ukrainian air defense, just tell us about the psychological impact. For example, people waking up in the night, hearing drones buzzing overhead. It must be terrifying.
Yeah, it is, that is also air raid signal throughout almost the whole night during last night in Kiev, and definitely, like many people heard, and how the air defense works, a lot of explosions, and the sound of drone coming is not a pleasant one. I could tell you, the first time Russians used them, it was in October of last year. It was in Odessa, and I heard it by my own ears. And from that time, unfortunately, we got a little bit used to this, but you can't be got used completely to this. You feel the danger, and that's why I think Russians are using these drones. One of the probably things that they like in it is this terrifying effect, and that is this sound and this attempt to scare people. But it would not work, because for Ukraine, this war is existential. It's to be or not to be. And that's why we are not scared of this, but people are getting more and more furious of what's going on.
And with regards to the long-awaited counteroffensive, of course, which many people are talking about it, how much pressure does Ukraine feel to succeed?
Definitely, there is a lot of hope. And when there is so much hope, there is a lot of pressure on our army and on everybody in the country. We're all praying for our victory and the success of our counteroffensive. But it's in the hands of our military, who proved themselves to be efficient, successful last year when they stopped Russian invasion, when they liberated part of occupied territories. So we believe in our army. We try to do everything we can to support them. We're very thankful to all our allies, the United Kingdom, the United States, other countries, which help us with the weaponry, which is very much needed. Also, like the hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and volunteers are helping our army, and we will do our best to help the army to be successful.
Alexei, military strategy aside, when it comes to discussing this counteroffensive, how is Ukraine preparing its citizens for the start of this counteroffensive, which could reignite fresh battlefronts?
We are doing the best in order to evacuate people from the endangered areas, and that is important part of our job. Definitely, that is also important to prepare infrastructure, medical infrastructure, and all critical infrastructure. So that's what the country is doing, and we will see how successful we are in this. I hope we will be successful, and we all hope that this counteroffensive will give possibility to finish this war this year, as soon as possible. That is our aim, because this war is devastating for the country, and every day of the war we have casualties and victims.
Can I just pick you up on that? Do you think that that is a possibility, that this counteroffensive could end this war this year?
Yeah, we believe in this, and I can tell you personally, last year when the Russia invaded Ukraine, I joined territorial defense and we were defending Kiev. I can tell you that if we would have 1 year ago the weaponry that we received later from our allies, we would finish everything last year. So I think that we have possibility to finish everything this year, to liberate all our territories. Definitely nobody can predict for sure, but I think, and millions of Ukrainians, we believe in this, and we hope this will happen.
Is that because you think that your troops will force the Russians out of the country, or bring them to the negotiating table?
I think that our big success can lead to collapse of Russian army completely in Ukraine. Also, it can lead to collapse of Russian political regime inside the country, inside Russia. So everything is possible. And we saw, like during the last 100 years, Russian Empire collapsed already twice. First it was Russian Empire, then it was Soviet Union, it's the same empire. So we believe that it's time for Russian Empire to collapse for the third time, and I hope the last one.
Well, Russia's ambassador to the UK has been speaking to the BBC saying, we have enormous resources, we haven't started to attack very seriously. What do you make of those comments?
I mean, that is Russian propaganda. They are using all their possibilities and all their force. Definitely, they look ridiculous, and the whole world sees the weakness of Russia because they claim to be the second strongest army in the world. They were telling that in 3 days they would take Kiev, and then they will march to La Manche. But in reality, we see quite opposite, that it took almost 1 year for them to capture not even completely small town of Bakhmut, which was before invasion 70,000 population. Or also they lost several big battles last year in Kherson, in Kharkiv area. So I think they try to show some kind of that they are bold and they feel themselves strong, but that's not the fact. The moral of their troops is very low. The moral inside Russian society is low. So we believe that one more big victory can have a final, like a very pivotal effect.
All right, Alexei Goncharenko, a Ukrainian MP in Kyiv, thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you very much.
And Japan has warned North Korea against a planned satellite launch, which could take place as soon as Wednesday. Japanese officials said today that they believe the launch could instead involve a ballistic missile and have approved orders to shoot it down if it enters Japanese territory. Well, North Korea has conducted a series of missile and weapons tests in recent months, including a new solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile. Some analysts say that the military satellite is part of North Korea's efforts to improve its surveillance technology in the event of a conflict. Earlier this month, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited a facility assembling North Korea's first spy satellite, indicating it could soon conduct its first space rocket launch in some 7 years. Well, we'll continue now with a story from Italy where there's a bit of a mystery taking place in the city of Venice. It's after a stretch of the Grand Canal turned fluorescent green. These images, well, they were taken near the famous Rialto Bridge in the last few hours. Authorities there have called an emergency meeting with police who are looking into whether it could be a climate protest. But unusually, no group has said that they are behind it. The fire service sent out this video. They've been helping the Environment Energy Agency take samples of the waters to be analysed. And that's all from us in Washington. In half an hour, our colleagues in London will be bringing you all of the latest news. I'm Helena Humphrey. Thanks for your company and stay with us if you can.
Hello there. Some of you may have seen the fabulous halo effect around the sun on Sunday evening. It was caused by thin high cloud made up of ice crystals. And just like a rainbow, you can get a double halo effect. There'll be some of that high cloud around on Bank Holiday Monday. For much of the country, it is going to be a dry and sunny day. But it'll be a chilly start. And there could be some cloud coming in off the North Sea through the Midlands and eastern parts of England. It'll break up through the day with some sunshine coming through. Away from the far north of Scotland, there will be a lot of sunshine. It's going to be strong sunshine as well. High UV levels for many of us on Monday. And that sun could be quite deceptive when it breaks through the cloud in the southeast because there'll be a cooler, stronger wind blowing in here and it'll be windy through the English Channel. Maybe a bit cooler in the southeast as well. But further north and west, it's going to be warming up. Temperatures back up to 20 or 21 Celsius in northwest England and Scotland. And Bank Holiday Monday will be dry because we've still got high pressure in charge. To the south of that high pressure, there's still some stronger winds across southern parts of England. And by Tuesday, there's more cloud in the North Sea. With the wind off the North Sea, we could see cloud lingering into the afternoon across some eastern parts of England. It's always going to be sunnier further west. It's always going to be warmer further west as well. Temperatures widely into the low 20s, perhaps 24 degrees in Glasgow. Quick look at Wednesday, because there's some changes. There's more low cloud around for England and Wales. It could linger in some places all day, keeping it somewhat cooler. Again, it's more towards the northwest where we've got the sunshine and the higher temperatures. And at long last, we could reach 25 degrees. In Scotland, very unusual not to hit 25 degrees in May. The last time that happened was way back in 2013 when we reached 25 Celsius on June the 6th. There were some quite chilly springs in the 80s, 87 in particular. We didn't reach 25 degrees until very late in June. We could hit the mid-20s again through Thursday and Friday, more towards the southwest of the UK. If you're wondering where all the rain's gone, it's in southern parts of Europe. Not great if you're holidaying in the Mediterranean. Far better to be holidaying here in the UK. That high pressure is not going anywhere. All week, it looks like it's going to be fine and dry with some warm sunshine and some cooler winds in the far south.
Welcome to Hard Talk from Johannesburg. I'm Stephen Saka. South Africa is a proud democracy, and in democracies, voters get to give their verdicts on their leaders. It's called accountability, and it might be about to bite the ruling African National Congress. They've been in power here for 29 years, since the apartheid system was overthrown, but right now, South Africa is in a big mess with a protracted energy crisis, shocking levels of unemployment and inequality, and systemic corruption. My guest is the Secretary General of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula. Is his party about to pay the price of failure? Fikile Mbalula, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you for having us, and welcome to the house.
It's a great pleasure to be here. How disappointed are you with the state South Africa is in today?
South Africa is undergoing challenges like many other countries, but I think to put us into a category of a failed state, it's an exaggeration. I can give.
You think that's a conversation that South Africans are having amongst themselves?
Well, it comes from a pocket of the powerful thinkers in the country who project us as display characteristics of a failed state. Of course, we may not be too defensive to that. If certain things are not resolved, we will become a failed state. But we are not journeying towards that direction.
But the reality is that if you are a young South African reaching adulthood today, you only have a 1 in 2 chance of actually finding a job. 50% of young people are out of work. A state should be able to provide work for its people, should ensure that the economy functions. We have a South Africa today where 60% of your people are living under the poverty line.
People living under the poverty line is a reflection of the state of the economy that has been battered, both informed by global features of the economy that is fluctuating at an international level, which has had an impact on our own economy, but also partly some of our own weaknesses in terms of managing the economy well. And we are on the recovery, and objectively, the COVID-19 messed up a lot of countries. The Ukraine-Russia war in itself has shattered most economies in the world, and it has brought a high level of cost of living and a number of challenges that have affected adversely the developing nations. So
but
some of the features that we see in terms of the economy of South Africa are not immune to us only. If you look at the state of unemployment in Europe, in some of the advanced economies, it is earth-shattering.
Yes, nothing like it is here, though. And Mr. Secretary General, we have to face one simple fact. Your party, the ANC, has been in power for 29 years, and you quite literally cannot even keep the lights on in this country today.
We have been in power for less than 30 years. And in that...
3 decades, and you can't keep the lights on.
From 300 years of deprivation and a mismanaged country and the economy, we have been able to cushion our people from the worst in these 30 years, and we still regard ourselves a young democracy. I can tell you, for an example, we have connected more of our people to the grid like never before, and small businesses in this country, where even people in the deep rural have never had an opportunity to have a taste of what is it to live with an electricity.
But what they are living with today across
it's
this
a load
country...
shedding that we are going to crash and defeat.
You call it load shedding. It basically means the power is out. Where we are sitting in headquarters right now, the power was out until literally 5 minutes ago. It's going to go out again late this afternoon for another 2.5 hours. People in your country are going to go home from work tonight. They're going to sit in their homes, and they are going to sit in candlelight with no power. Are you not ashamed that after 3 decades in power, controlling Eskom, the power company, which is a state-owned enterprise, are you not ashamed that this is the reality?
Can I explain to you? The problem of South Africa's load shedding is a challenge of demand and supply. We did so much for this country, connecting businesses and our people to the power grid, and we did not balance that with infrastructure development as the long-term strategy. And that has actually affected us, but it doesn't mean that we'll not get out of it.
Yeah, the former President Thabo Mbeki has said that for years and years and years, Eskom, which is a state-owned enterprise, told the ANC government that without massive investment in the energy sector, they would not be able to provide enough power for this country. At the time, Mbeki says the ANC refused to listen. He said recently, Eskom was right, we in the ANC were wrong. You have to own this crisis.
What I'm saying to you, it might not be sufficient for you to understand when I talk about an imbalance in terms of energy supply and demand. That did not balance with the rollout of infrastructure development. We've built power utilities, but we did not refurbish some. And that coincides with our plans in terms of addressing the just transition. Decommissioning some of the utilities also has affected the progress that we seek to make to maintain the lights on. But all of that has now been addressed and is being attended to.
Yeah, you say this is all being addressed. South Africans would only wish that were true. The acting CEO of Eskom said the risk of stage 8 outages this winter is extremely high unless things change. And right now, they don't look as though they're going to change.
What they have said to us and the plan that they are implementing to address the surge of winter power failures, they will stabilize that through diesel, but we're not looking at short-term measures. We're looking at the totality of things that we need to do to solve this problem of load shedding. The renewables, how do we deal with that? But how do we also deal with the capacity which we've got of nuclear? And then how do we deal with the question of maintenance and refurbishment of our plants? And that is what is important.
Mr. Secretary General, you're not being straight with the South African people. You said just hours ago that this problem will be solved by the end of the year. There is not one person inside Eskom, inside the energy sector, who believes that to be true. Indeed, the chair of Eskom said just a few months ago, this will continue for for the next 2 years?
We have given government and all our ministers that not even before end of the year, everything must be done to do away with load shedding. That's what we have said. And if that, in terms of our projection, could happen before end of the year, we are happy about that. This load shedding has just made a mess of our country and projected us as something else.
It's
So
costing
it
you,
must be-
according to your Reserve Bank, it's costing
Correct.
you at least 2% of GDP.
Absolutely.
You
So
can't afford that.
we can't afford that, and that is why we are focused in terms of dealing with it. It is an Achilles heel, and I can't tell you tonight or any time that this is an easy matter for our government. Surely, after COVID-19, this is the biggest challenge that has actually faced us internally.
It's very candid of you
In our
to say this is an Achilles heel, because
Yes.
Achilles heels tend to bring people down. And if this continues, it will bring the ANC down, won't it?
It will affect the fortunes of the ANC to register outright majority. It will. If ever it is not dealt with decisive, it will affect, but it will not take ANC totally out of power.
Mr. Secretary General, isn't the truth that this load shedding crisis is going to have such a damaging impact on the ANC because it not only reveals strategic incompetence going back decades, but it also reveals systemic corruption. Andre de Ruyter, the former CEO of Eskom, he has said that organized criminal cartels have been operating inside the state-owned energy company. He says that the ANC knows about it. One senior minister acknowledged it to him and said, to paraphrase him, that the comrades have to eat. And another senior figure inside the ruling party, according to Mr. de Ruyter, was actively involved in the systemic corruption.
The less said about the radar, the better, because
it's too embarrassing.
No, he should be telling us that these are the steps he has taken. The minister that is not the minister of the maintenance of law and order and the maintenance of justice in this country.
But if he reports systemic criminality linked to the ANC, don't you want to know
all what
about
he
it?
could do that is best in terms of dealing with the challenges that are facing Eskom was to write a book, which is not conclusive, all in all, including giving us, that is why I've taken him to court and I'm suing him, not for money, but for saying to him, bring what you say to the fore, because you failed as an agent of the law
He
in the
says-
position that he occupied to take that matter to law, because there are laws in this country that require him as a chief executive officer not to seek permission from a
He
politician,
told,
but to
according
take
to
it
him,
to
he
law enforcement.
told ministers, he certainly told Mr. Praveen Gordhan, public enterprise minister,
Minister Gordhan is not a minister of police or even commissioner of police. He's a minister. And if Minister Gordhan could be implicated in corruption or any other minister, why will Peter go and report him to a politician and not report to his counterparts, Batoyi and everybody, and say, help me, there is corruption. Give me the names and take that to law enforcement. You've got a partner in me in fighting corruption.
You just
That's all what
mentioned-
I'm saying on behalf of the ANC.
and you just
I'm not interested in his shenanigans about posturing and all of that.
All right. But
Doesn't matter.
The basic point that the South African people are interested in is who is on the take, who is corrupt inside the government. And what we know, not from Mr. de Ruyter, but what we know from the Zondo Commission, which has been painstakingly looking at this so-called state capture, where money from should go to help the people of this country build a better country is being siphoned off by criminals and their partners in government. What we know is that 14 billion rand of Eskom contracts went to state capture, to criminality. We know that 41 billion rand was looted from Transnet, the main transport state-owned enterprise, by state capture. This is not for discussion. The Zondo Commission has investigated, and that's what it
Who
found.
established the Zondo Commission? It's the ANC. As a
You expect
as a
credit.
measure,
You expect credit for that.
as a measure of fighting corruption, I don't expect credit for that. I'm saying, do not be economic with your projection of the past as though it was not dealt with. That's the problem. You people are all about. There was Zondo Commission. It simply fell from the sky. It happened on its own. The ANC was just folded arms and allowed corruption to deal with. Can a failed state do that? To establish a commission to fight corruption?
So
and
you
learn
tell
from
me,
it?
you tell me
Let
the
me tell
senior
you,
figures inside
the
the
figures-
ANC
the
who
figures-
have been brought to justice.
Have you been told? I can't give you now the numbers. How many billions have been covered through forfeiture unit, which has been beefed up in the fight against state capture and getting money that has been stolen as a result of corruption in this country? As we speak, you're not emphasizing that. Correctly so. The report of the Zondo Commission does say those things, but who established the Zondo Commission? It's the ANC.
Where are the big fish
Where
in
have
the
you
government
seen
and the ANC who
where-
are currently behind bars for systemic corruption?
the work in terms of this commission has just ended a year ago? Law enforcement is a lot of resources have been injected into law enforcement. Special investigations to investigate this corruption have been undertaken. The Guptas have run away from this country. We are still fighting their extradition from Dubai.
Are you also aware of the degree to which overseas investors are now turning away from South Africa? Neil Froneman, the CEO at Sibanye-Stillwater, which I think is the biggest employer in the mining sector in South Africa, he says business investment in South Africa is on strike. Investors now are very negatively disposed to this country. They've lost faith and they've lost trust. For outside investors, they look at the foreign policy, diplomatic orientation of South Africa. They see that right now you are locked in a tense dispute with the United States because the US sees you as deeply sympathetic to Vladimir Putin's Russia, despite the Russian all-out invasion of Ukraine.
We have explained those issues. Our government is dealing with those matters with the United States of America. We are not locked in any dispute of any form. And we are non-aligned when it comes to the conflict in Russia. And that is the line we're pursuing.
Well, for a start, the US ambassador here in South Africa said that he had evidence that weapons had been loaded onto a Russian...
I met with him yesterday. He apologized for being overzealous and saying things that he shouldn't have said.
Yeah, you say he's apologized. We have not heard him himself issue an apology.
Well, I am saying to you, he have apologized. I met him right here in the Revolutionary House yesterday.
Your government has launched an investigation about that alleged
correct.
weapons
It is
shipment.
correct.
Can you categorically guarantee to me here and now, as the head of the ANC, that no weapons were put on board that vessel?
Our government has reassured the ANC that there is nothing to the truth about weapons being exchanged between our countries.
I phrased my question carefully. Can you now categorically say no weapons were put on board that Russian ship?
I've explained to you that there is a action that has been taken by our government in terms of investigating.
South Africa is a treaty member of the International Criminal Court. If Putin comes here in August, as planned, your government will be obliged to arrest him. As head of the ANC, do you believe your government should and indeed will arrest Vladimir
If it was
Putin?
according to the ANC, we will want President Putin to be here even tomorrow.
You would?
To come to our country. But
You would welcome Vladimir Putin here right now.
Of course, we will
A man who is being investigated for war crimes by the
We
International
will
Criminal
welcome
Court.
him to come here as part and parcel of BRICS, but we know that we are constrained by the ICC in terms of doing that. Putin is a head of state. Do you think that a head of state can just be arrested anywhere? How many crimes have your country committed in Iraq? How many crimes Have everyone else who's so vocal today committed in Iraq and Afghanistan? Have you arrested them?
You know the impact that this
You're
stand
making
of
a lot
yours.
of noise about putting instead of working for peace between Ukraine and Russia, and you failed to resolve the war. Where are the weapons of mass destruction? Tony Blair went to Iraq and claimed that there are weapons of mass destruction. Did you see anybody standing against that in the United Kingdom and Britain? More than millions of people have died in Iraq and Afghanistan, and there are no weapons of mass destruction. We know what the war is about.
Mr. Secretary General.
Between Russia and Ukraine. We want peace. That's what is important, so that the world can thrive. And organs and institutions of the world that institute world peace must not be conspicuous by their silence in deciding decisively.
We don't have much time left. I want to bring it back to domestic South African politics before we end. You acknowledge with me very candidly that the load shedding is causing real political damage to the ANC. You called it an Achilles heel. You know the opinion polls show that the ANC right now is sunk well below the 50% mark in terms of support, which means in the 2024 election, it is highly likely you will not win a parliamentary majority. You're probably, if you can rule at all, going to have to rule by coalition. Are you looking at Julius Malema's economic freedom fighters as a partner for the ANC after 2024?
I've been heading ANC elections now for over a decade. I've never gone to an election where the polls have been positive about the incumbent. Because of the sense of incumbency, you will always be affected negatively by the polls.
Well, forgive me, but in previous elections, the ANC has polled 60%, 70%.
No,
this time you're at the low 40s.
No, we didn't. We were favored by the fortunes, our fortunes in the elections, because we're the new president. But the ANC polled below 50 in the last election, and even before that election. Who will work with in the election going forward in terms of this country? We as the ANC, we're not working to achieve the result of a coalition.
And just one more question about Malema. His manifesto commitments are quite clear. He'll tell South Africans if they vote for him, he's going to confiscate land without compensation. He's going to nationalize key industries, including the mines and the banks. If you are to do a deal with Malema, you will have to consider whether you're prepared to take on his program.
We don't have dealings with anybody, and we don't looking at deals in 2024. We are working very hard for our people because we draw our mandate from our people. The dealings with anybody have not worked in terms of the local government elections and the coalitions, and that is why we have adopted a framework that must guide us. Most of the coalitions in this country have collapsed. And that is why as the ANC, we've been working with the framework of stabilizing the the coalitions in the hung municipalities. And South Africans can see for themselves that coalitions don't bear any fruit.
I'm sure you'd agree with me that democracy is all about accountability. It gives people the right to hold their leaders to account. After 29 years, with the state South Africa is in today, where you literally can't even keep the lights on, do you think that you in the ANC deserve the continued support of your people?
In that 30 years, we have connected our people to the grid. We have guaranteed and given our both people social security. We have given our people decent housing. We have faltered on electricity, which is load shedding, a single biggest demand for our people and our economy, and we are going to solve it. And doing the misrule of 300 years, in 30 years, we have done so much, and yet we are defined by one single issue. We will defeat that issue. As the African National Congress, we are determined to ensure that load shedding is something of the past. It does not erode everything good that we have done. Not that in that 30 years we did nothing wrong. We did falter. We made mistakes. We did veer away. We accept. And that is why we are determined to come back. We renew ourselves. We change things. We fight corruption. We fight even the possibility of degenerating to a failed state. That's what we are determined to do as the ANC.
And we have to end there, but Fikile Mbalula, I thank you very much for being on Hard Talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello there. Some of you may have seen the fabulous halo effect around the sun on Sunday evening. It was caused by thin high cloud made up of ice crystals. And just like a rainbow, you can get a double halo effect. There'll be some of that high cloud around on Bank Holiday Monday. For much of the country, it is going to be a dry and sunny day. But it'll be a chilly start. And there could be some cloud coming in off the North Sea through the Midlands and eastern parts of England. It'll break up through the day with some sunshine coming through. Away from the far north of Scotland, there will be a lot of sunshine. It's going to be strong sunshine as well, high UV levels for many of us on Monday, and that's going to be quite deceptive when it breaks through the cloud in the southeast, because there'll be a cooler, stronger wind blowing in here, and it'll be windy through the English Channel. Maybe a bit cooler in the southeast as well, but further north and west, it's going to be warming up. Temperatures back up to 20 or 21 Celsius in northwest England and Scotland. And Bank Holiday Monday will be dry because we've still got high pressure in charge. To the south of that high pressure, there's still some stronger winds across southern parts of England. And by Tuesday, there's more cloud in the North Sea. With the wind off the North Sea, we could see cloud lingering into the afternoon across some eastern parts of England. It's always going to be sunnier further west. It's always going to be warmer further west as well. Temperatures widely into the low 20s, perhaps 24 degrees in Glasgow. Quick look at Wednesday, because there's some changes. There's more low cloud around for England and Wales. It could linger in some places all day, keeping it somewhat cooler. Again, it's more towards the northwest where we've got the sunshine and the higher temperatures. And at long last, we could reach 25 degrees. In Scotland, very unusual not to hit 25 degrees in May. The last time that happened was way back in 2013 when we reached 25 Celsius on June the 6th. There were some quite chilly springs in the 80s, 87 in particular. We didn't reach 25 degrees until very late in June. We could hit the mid-20s again through Thursday and Friday, more towards the southwest of the UK. If you're wondering where all the rain's gone, it's in southern parts of Europe. Not great if you're holidaying in the Mediterranean, far better to be holidaying here in the UK. That high pressure's not going anywhere. All week, it looks like it's going to be fine and dry with some warm sunshine and some cooler winds in the far south.
Say play BBC News to most smart speakers, and you'll get the latest headlines and reports on international, national and local stories that matter to you. For your news, when you want it, just say play BBC News.
A day of history in the making. Yeah! Are you ready? Truly awe-inspiring.
That was fabulous.
This is the moment. They will say, I was there.
Download the BBC News app now and get the latest headlines as they happen. Personalise your app to learn more about the stories you care about and watch BBC News live wherever you are. Stay up to date, whatever you're up to. Download the BBC News app.
A day of history in the making. Yeah! Are you ready? Got to be good looking 'cause you're so hard to see.
truly awe-inspiring. This is the moment. They would say, I was there.
Today we're looking at the state of British politics.
Asking, is technology ruining football?
Are we too obsessed with our phones?
Ellen from Hull wants to know, how hot's the planet going to get?
And we'll explain why prices keep going up and up.
Also, Rach, did you know space has its own smell?
Really? What of? The world is fast moving and can be confusing.
So let's talk about it.
5 Live Breakfast with Rachel and Rick. Listen on BBC Sounds.
I just felt this tightening in my stomach. Where do I need to go? How can I get there?
Rescuers are using their bare hands to search desperately for survivors.
In a lot of the stories that we tell, they can be so bleak. People here wonder if they can ever rebuild. We need to show some hope.
So this is what an exodus looks like. My coping mechanism at the time was to not think further than an hour ahead.
My job is investigating bad stuff that's on social media. I know by doing this interview and sharing it, I'll probably get more online abuse. My job is to expose how people are targeted because I'm a reporter who can do that.
At the end of the day, a proclamation of a new king is actually the moment to be looking forward. And that tempered the way that I cover the story.
Everyone ready for that proclamation of a new king.
Behind the stories. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
President. Doing a deal on the debt limit, Democrats and Republicans reach an agreement to avert possible economic disaster.
Congratulated by their fellow members of the expedition.
70 years since the conquest of Everest, we'll be speaking to one of the 6,000 or so people who've reached the top. Hello there, I'm Victoria Valentine. We're going to start with Turkey. Turkey's long-term president, Erdogan, has secured another 5 years in power after winning the runoff ballot in the country's presidential election. There were joyous scenes on the streets of Istanbul as Mr. Erdogan celebrated with his supporters after winning around 52% of the vote. The 69-year-old will now serve another 5 years in office, potentially stretching his time in power to a quarter century. Addressing a jubilant crowd, President Erdogan promised to build a strong economy and called for unity. Meanwhile, his opponent, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, said it was the most unfair and that he felt saddened by the troubles awaiting Turkey. Runa Ayenga reports.
Ecstatic Erdogan supporters outside the presidential palace in Ankara last night. Earlier in the day, the president had sung to the crowd and recited a poem. This Erdogan supporter says, "Bye-bye, Mr. Kemal. Thank God Islam has won." We are very happy, full of joy. I can't even contain myself. I thank God. Big celebrations, but they don't show that this was the biggest challenge to Mr. Erdogan's authority in years. He became Prime Minister in 2003, later becoming President. To build up that position, he has stifled all opposition. His non-religious rival, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, says the election was unfair.
Mr. Erdogan had one big advantage, almost total control of the media. Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu's CHP party had campaigned against crackdowns on dissent and for a return to an independent justice system and parliamentary democracy. A somber mood here as the results came out.
I am really sad. I think the country is heading towards the darkness. I think it is not looking good for the future of our children and grandchildren.
He left the CHP headquarters in tears. World leaders have been congratulating Mr. Erdogan. He enjoys a big role internationally, a friend to countries in the East, while being a member of NATO. He's also put himself forward as a mediator in the Russia-Ukraine war. But it's back home where divisions may be hard to heal. Inflation is high, and rebuilding cities after the earthquakes in February are a massive challenge. Mr. Erdogan promised in his victory speech to return Syrian refugees back to their homeland. Anti-immigrant feeling in Turkey has been growing. October will see the centenary of the Turkish Republic. Mr. Erdogan says he's confident about the future. Others are less convinced. Aruna Iyengar, BBC News. To California with Jihan Tugal, who's a professor of sociology at the University of California, Berkeley. Now, Erdogan went into this election cycle arguably more vulnerable than he has been at any time in the last 20 years, yet he won fairly comfortably here. International election observers say that the first round certainly was free in terms of what happened.
Yes, depending on the definition of freedom, that is partially true. So, as your coverage showed, the media has been monopolized, the judiciary has been monopolized, but there is a near free vote. What is not free is that the most prominent Kurdish, most prominent urban rights activists who have politicized earthquake in a successful way are all in prison, and they will remain in prison. So there was no real successful politicization of the real issues Turkey is facing. Erdogan competed against a very weak opponent, politically speaking, ideologically speaking, an opponent, or rather a set of opponents with no shared, strong, programmatic vision. So Erdogan has been in a lot of trouble because of his management of the earthquake and the economy. The economy is in shambles, high inflation, low wages. But as it is, with all this high inflation and low wages, at least in the short term, this economy is sustainable, and this is what the people voted for. And the opposition promised something like the 2010s Turkey, which is also ruled by Erdogan, but with different sets of experts, and the opposition promised to bring back those experts. The problem is that path had already failed. So the opposition was promising something that had failed as an alternative to something that might fail or is failing. So there was no real competition in that sense.
What does all of this actually show about the political climate in Turkey? Is there strong support for authoritarianism in the country, or is it not as free as we might be led to believe?
No, I'm trying, that is right, but I'm trying to tell you it's both. So there is freedom for a lot of people, but not for the people who can politicize issues successfully. Urban rights activists and the Kurdish leaders are not free. And the people who are incompetent are enjoying a lot of freedom, these 6 parties of the mainstream opposition. And a lot of support for Erdogan's policies and party and person from half of the country. So that is not fake, fabricated support. It is certainly extremely tightly controlled, and the media is controlled, as I had mentioned, but it doesn't mean the support is not real. The support is very real because people prefer these policies, a nationalist form of capitalism controlled by the state, to the free capitalism in Turkey that appeared to be successful but failed miserably by the end of the 2000s.
Now, during his campaign rallies, though, he took a pretty hard line on foreign policy ahead of this vote, pushing back on Sweden's accession to NATO despite pressures from allies. He was also pointing quite a lot to Turkey's growing role, as he sees it, on the world stage. What do you think we can see in terms of Turkey in global politics going forward under another 5 years with Erdogan?
So yeah, that's a very important question. I should emphasize Erdogan is not in reality as anti-Western as he seems. So he combines aspects of anti-Westernism with pro-Western policies. He's building bridges with Russia and Ukraine, or at least trying to. So the way he sells these to the Muslim world at large and to his own nation is that he, and this is finding a lot of support in the electorate because they perceive the West as the real culprit of the devastation in the region, which is of course partially true.
You there, boss?
But what is denied in that perception is that Russia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey also participated in the destruction. So that part of it is denied, and Erdogan seen is as an anti-Western hero. This Western-led global democratic order, which doesn't have any, real basis in Turkey's region, at least.
Professor, we're going to have to leave it there. Professor Cihan Togel, thank you very much for your time. And just to let our viewer perspective on all of this in our business news in about half an hour's time. Now let's get some of the day's other news now, starting India. The Chief Minister of Manipur State in Northeast says 40 militants have been killed in continuing security operations. The state has been hit by violence, ethnic violence, which erupted at the beginning of the month when tribal clashed with the ethnic majority Meitei people. At least 60 people have been killed and tens of thousands displaced. With national elections due later this year, the counting shows that the socialists have lost the key regions of Valencia and Aragon. The opposition Conservative Popular Party did well in most cities. Talks aimed at concluding an international treaty against plastic pollution are taking place in Paris today. Government ministers from around the world are attending the event. The UN says that more than 460 million tons of plastic is produced every year. Only 9% of it is recycled. London's Metropolitan Police in the UK says it will stop its emergency calls involving mental health events from September unless there's an immediate threat to life. They free up officers so that they can concentrate on tackling crime. Now to the United States, and after weeks of negotiations, President Joe Biden and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy have now finalized a deal to raise the national debt ceiling. A short time ago, the bill was released, so let's take a look at some of the key details. The agreement will lift the debt limit until January 1st, 2025. Congress allocated an additional $86 billion for security spending, while decreasing non-defense spending by over $200 billion. There is still work to be done, and we will get more on that in a moment. But earlier, President Biden shared his thoughts on the day's developments.
We've reached a bipartisan budget agreement that we're ready to move to the full Congress. And I think it's a really important step forward, and it takes the threat of catastrophic default off the table, protects our hard-earned and historic economic recovery, and the agreement also represents a compromise, which means no one got everything they want. But that's the responsibility of governing. And this deal is good news for, I believe you'll see, for the American people. The agreement prevents the worst possible crisis, a default, for the first time in our nation's history.
Well, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy will need to convince members of his Republican Party to back this bill. He was speaking to Fox News on Sunday.
95% of all those in the conference were very excited. But think about this. We finally were able to cut spending. We're the first Congress to vote for cutting spending year over year. We were able to do this when the president said he wasn't even going to talk to us. This is really a step in the right direction. It puts us a trajectory that's different. We put a statutory cap on only spending 1% for the next 6 years. So we let government grow, but at a slower rate.
In a way, we don't know what would happen because this would be new territory, and the consequences would depend to some extent on how long the default period. Consequences could be that federal agency workers wouldn't get paid, nor would those in receipt of social security benefits. Those payments could be delayed, so that could lead to serious recession. It would also be a shock, of course, to financial markets. Worth remembering, US debt seen as this ultra-safe asset, and the dollar the dominant reserve currency. So America's reputation would no doubt take a hit. And then there'd be the political fallout as well in Washington DC, depending on who exactly would get the blame.
Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
Grace spoke to me just moments before serving her customers for the last time. She had to shut another venue last year, and now it's time for her to close this one.
It's a really 4.5 years, but I've been running Spice Box as, a street food business before that. So it's about 7 years of hard work. And yeah, it's sad.
As food and utility prices rose and customer numbers fell, it became too difficult to stay open.
People are struggling and there's less money to go around, and obviously eating out is a luxury.
But Grace's story reflects many 500 venues have closed in the last 3 years. And so Grace will now be selling her food to shops, one way to keep her brand alive at a time when it wasn't possible to keep her restaurants open.
You're live with BBC News. Now let's return to our main story now. In 2 decades, President Erdogan has changed Turkey forever. Pierre-Antoine Denis looks back at the Turkish president's political life.
20 years and some extra for this man, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The Turkish president is on for a new mandate. Let's look back at his life. He started in politics in 1994 when he became Istanbul mayor. But the real breakthrough comes in 2001 when he launches his new party, the AKP. 2 years later, in 2003, Turkey Prime Minister for the first time. His first decade in power is very successful. Turkey is back on the map with an annual growth estimated at around 5% between 2003 and 2013. But in 2013 is also the year when protest starts to happen over his rule, as critics start to say that he's more and more autocratic. Still, Recep Tayyip Erdogan is the constitution 2 years later and grants himself some power to keep his hold on Turkish politics. Now, after poor local election in 2016, a soldier-led rebellion ends in chaos. 300 civilians hoping to stop the soldier from accessing Mr. Erdogan's house died in the clashes. Ultimately, Recep Tayyip Erdogan built his whole political career on identity and Turkey. The country is now a NATO member, and despite the war in Ukraine, Mr. Erdogan still holds a very good relationship with President Vladimir Putin. The country is also now the 20th biggest economy in the world. Back home, the conversion of Istanbul's Hagia Sophia into a mosque angered Christians but rallied the whole Muslim world behind him. Now, the Turkish population made the choice of staying with what they know in Recep Tayyip Erdogan, but with a growing inflation and a strong opposition, the Turkish president now may be facing the most difficult 5 years in office.
Well, here in the UK, ITV's This Morning programme will air as normal today, as the organisation insists there are no plans to axe the show. The broadcaster has been facing questions about Philip Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague, which prompted the presenter to quit on Friday, admitting he had lied to his employers. Our correspondent Simon Jones is at Television Centre in Westland, where the show is based.
He admitted he had lied to colleagues and also to members of his family and the public about the fact he had an affair with a much younger man. Now, he described that relationship as unwise, but said it wasn't illegal. Today, though, we've learned some more details about the relationship. A lawyer for Philip Schofield has told us, in terms of the relationship, the pair first met when the man was actually a boy aged 15 when Philip Schofield visited his theatre school. But the lawyer stressed there was never any sexual relationship of any type until the man began working at This Morning, and he didn't start working on This Morning until he was 18 years old. But I think there are some real questions now about the future of the programme. It's a flagship programme for ITV. ITV says This Morning will be on air as normal tomorrow, and it says there are no questions about the future of This Morning. It is not facing the axe. ITV bosses say in 2020 they actually carried out an investigation into rumours about Philip Schofield, but they uncovered only hearsay and nothing concrete. But questions for the bosses here at ITV about the very culture of its flagship programme.
Government plans in the UK for supermarkets to introduce a voluntary cap on some basic food items won't make a jot of difference, that's according to the British Retail Consortium. Ministers are to discuss proposals with major retailers as part of efforts to tackle the rising cost of living. Our business correspondent Peter Ruddick explains.
The weekly Big Shop. Latest figures might show the rising cost of living has eased slightly, but when it comes to food, prices continue to surge at record high levels. For some, the cost of putting a meal on the table is becoming impossible to manage. Now, discussions are taking place between retailers and the government about a possible cap on the cost of some items. The idea is supermarkets would agree a price for certain basic items, things like bread, pasta, and milk, in order to help households budget better. Ministers insist discussions are still at a very early stage and say any cap would be entirely voluntary.
My understanding is that the government is working constructively with supermarkets as to how we address the very real concerns around food inflation and the cost of living, and doing so in a way that is also very mindful to the impact on suppliers.
Food price controls have already been introduced in other European countries, including France. However, retailers here are sceptical.
We haven't heard this from ministers. First we saw about the proposals really were in the papers today, but it's a meaningless pledge. It wouldn't jot a difference for customers in our stores because we already have the most competitive grocery market in Europe, and that's driven customers looking for the best prices.
Any deal, if it happens, could also be a problem for smaller shops and food producers like dairy farmers. Many already struggle with supermarket competition and tight profit margins. For shoppers, it is at the checkout where any deal, if it happens, will ultimately be judged. Peter Ruddick, BBC News.
The 70th anniversary of the first ascent of Mount Everest is marked today to commemorate the first successful ascent. In 1953, Edmund Hillary of New Zealand and Tenzing Norgay, Sherpa of Nepal, reached the summit of Mount Everest for the first time in history. It stands at 8,849 meters. That's 20,000 feet on the border of Nepal and China. We're live now to New Zealand, and we can speak now to Lydia Brady, the first woman to climb Everest without oxygen. Bravo, Lydia. How amazing.
Thank you.
Now, why did you decide to do this in the first place?
Oh, I made an oxygen-free single push alpine style ascent of one of the other 8,000 meter peaks in the world. The year before, it was my 7th Himalayan expedition, and we never climbed it without oxygen. So I figured it was worth giving it a go.
Okay. I mean, this sounds like something, it might be possible if you were mountains, that appeals to people. Why is it that people go back and back and back and do this again and again? Because there are significant risks.
There's significant risks that you can mitigate by experience and by good planning, and on high mountains by lots of oxygen. And, we are drawn to different aspects of the world. Some people are drawn to rivers, some people are drawn to mountains, some people are drawn to deserts. And big nature is part of our biology. And so I think the ability to live a simple but consequential life, and consequences good as well.
We're just looking at some of your pictures of your various ascents over the years. What does it feel like to be standing there, on top of the world?
So the first time for me, it felt like a huge wave of relief, because I really was unsure if I'd be strong to get down as well, and nobody else there, and no fixed ropes as well. So I was solo on the last day, but I can't call it a solo ascent. So a huge relief to be able to turn around and go back down. But on the other ascents, I've been a mountain guide, and I'm super proud of being a mountain guide. I've guided Everest than any other woman has guided it at the moment. And it's great because the job for a woman is opening up, and lots of groovy young female guides are coming on. And as a guide, you're there with a passion and a love for the beauty of this mountain. It's amazing to be on this highest point of the world, and you're there caring for your clients. So it's a great double pleasure, I guess.
As someone who's guiding other people up this mountain, and there are now, I believe, more than 6,000 people who have now done it, what do you feel about the criticism that there are too many people now, and the site itself is suffering as a result?
The site is suffering, and really we only guide 2 different routes on Mount Everest, or Chongmalong of Sagarmatha. There are a lot. Perhaps what we just need to do is, manage the rubbish, or manage it a little bit better. But I don't think we put rules and regulations on climbing Everest, because there's a lot of different ways to climb Everest, and we climb fewer different routes than we used to do in the olden days, because we're guiding most of the time. I would say you're safer going with lots more oxygen.
I think that's probably right. Lydia Brady, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts there. The 70th anniversary of the first ascent of Mount Everest today with Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay.
Hello there. Some of you may have seen the fabulous halo effect around the sun on Sunday evening. It was caused by thin high cloud made up of ice crystals. And just like a rainbow, you can get a double halo effect. There'll be some of that high cloud around on Bank Holiday Monday. For much of the country, it is going to be a dry and sunny day. But it'll be a chilly start. And there could be some cloud coming in off the North Sea through the Midlands and eastern parts of England. It'll break up through the day with some sunshine coming through. Away from the far north of Scotland, there will be a lot of sunshine. It's going to be strong sunshine as well, high UV levels for many of us on Monday, and that sun could be quite deceptive when it breaks through the cloud in the southeast, because there'll be a cooler, stronger wind blowing in here. It'll be windy through the English Channel, maybe a bit cooler in the southeast as well. But further north and west, it's going to be warming up. Temperatures back up to 20 or 21 Celsius in northwest England and Scotland. And Bank Holiday Monday will be dry, because we've still got high pressure in charge. To the south of that high pressure, there's still some stronger winds across southern parts of England. And by Tuesday, there's more cloud in the North Sea. With the wind off the North Sea, we could see cloud lingering into the afternoon across some eastern parts of England. It's always going to be sunnier further west. It's always going to be warmer further west as well. Temperatures widely into the low 20s, perhaps 24 degrees in Glasgow. Quick look on Wednesday, because there's some changes. There's more low cloud around for England and Wales. It could linger in some places all day, keeping it somewhat cooler. Again, it's more towards the northwest, where we've got the sunshine and the higher temperatures. And at long last, we could reach 25 degrees. In Scotland, very unusual not to hit 25 degrees in May. The last time that happened was way back in 2013, when we reached 25 Celsius on June 6th. There were some quite chilly springs in the 80s, 87 in particular. We didn't reach 25 degrees until very late in June. We could hit the mid-20s again through Thursday and Friday, more towards the southwest of the UK. If you're wondering where all the rain's gone, it's in southern parts of Europe. Not great if you're holidaying in the Mediterranean, far better to be holidaying here in the UK. That high pressure's not going anywhere. All week, it looks like it's going to be fine and dry, with some warm sunshine and some cooler winds in the far south.
A day of history in the making.
Europe!
Are you ready? Got to be good looking 'cause you're so hard to see.
Truly awe-inspiring.
That was fabulous.
This is the moment. They would say, I was there.
It's always something of a rigmarole when a US president is on the move. Yes, it's about security. It's also a projection of power.
They're the people you call when all else fails. If we can't trust them, that's a very scary thought.
This is the European Space Agency's JUICE mission, and it has a 4 billion mile voyage ahead.
We're going to be able to see exquisite detail in those pictures.
More than just the headlines. The BBC News channel. Watch on iPlayer. Say play BBC News to most smart speakers, and you'll get the latest headlines and in-depth reports on international, national, and local stories that matter to you. For your news, when you want it, just say play BBC News.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Re-elected for 5 years, supporters of Turkey's President Erdogan celebrate, but with a divide, persistently high inflation. What next? A compromise deal, Joe Biden says, to raise the US debt ceiling has been, but at what cost? And forging a career between music and technology, we speak to the 80s synth pop star Thomas Dolby on being both a musician and a tech wizard. Hello there, I'm Victoria Valentine. Let's start in Turkey, where the country's currency, the lira, has slipped to a new record low after the country's electoral authorities declared President Erdogan the winner of the election runoff. Amid an economic crisis, the country's official inflation rate is currently more, although it has been dropping in recent months. In his speech, he said battling the rising cost of living is Turkey's most important issue, but that it's not difficult to solve. Well, joining me now is Hamish Kinnear, who's this path of policy that he has embarked upon. Do you think Turkey is going to be defaulting on its debts anytime soon?
Thank you. Yes, well, the Turkish lira, partly as a result of economic policies under the current Turkish government, has lost about 80% of its value over the past 5 years. And in the lead, and although that props up the lira, it's not necessarily stable in the long term. And if Turkey is no longer able to finance imports or to service its external debt, it could end up in default. Now, of course, there are corrective actions that the Turkish government could take to try and hold off that risk, but we haven't necessarily seen a clear plan from the Turkish government as to how it intends to deal with that yet.
Okay, let's just put this into context for our viewers. Hamish, who are Turkey's economic allies internationally?
Well, it has had help from abroad. So Erdogan has a good relationship with Vladimir Putin, for example, and he's agreed to defer gas payments. Turkey's also patched up relations with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states more recently. So the Saudi government deposited 5 billion with the Turkish central bank more recently as well. But it's unclear whether that would be enough to completely stave off crisis without the central bank taking corrective measures. So in the brief piece before, you mentioned inflation being at 44%. A clear way to deal with that, certainly the orthodox path, would be to raise interest rates in an effort to bring down it. And that's what we've seen institutions like the Bank of England or the US Federal Reserve doing over the past year. But the Turkish central bank has actually been cutting interest rates since late 2021. And one of the reasons it's doing that is it's in line with President Erdogan's belief that lower interest rates actually lead to lower inflation. So there's an uncertainty over whether the Turkish Central Bank is going to be willing to raise interest rates. And actually, on the campaign trail, Erdogan's repeatedly said that he wants lower interest rates going forward as well.
Now, complicating all of this, Hamish, is the fact that the country hosts the most refugees in the world. I believe there's more than 3.5 million Syrians currently with temporary protection status in the country. What impact is that having on finances?
Well, it's also a huge logistical challenge for Turkey, the presence of millions of refugees. And it's also politically controversial. It's one of the main issues under discussion at the election. In terms of the economy, it's not necessarily the number one problem, just because Turkey receives this significant amount of external burden kind of pales in comparison to more pressing issues like the rate of inflation or the weakening lira, for example.
Hamish Kinney, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, an agreement to raise the debt ceiling in the United States has now been reached, as the President Joe Biden and the Speaker Kevin McCarthy will need to convince members of Congress in their own parties for the legislation to be approved. Now, the bill is seen as a bit of a compromise.
This deal is set to raise the debt ceiling for 2 years, and that's a big win for the White House. Why? Well, it means that for Joe Biden, who of course is seeking re-election, so he'll be pleased with that. But the Republicans are trying to set up wins in terms of policy, for some people in receipt of food assistance stamps, and there's going to be less money than planned going to the Internal Revenue Service. That money part of a democratic push to crack down on tax evasion by wealthy people and corporations. Now, the hard sell is on both sides. So Joe Biden will try and persuade the Democratic caucus in Congress to get behind this deal, and Kevin McCarthy will try and persuade his Republican colleagues as well. However, it already looks like there are some mumblings and grumblings on both sides, particularly from the right wing of the Republican Party and the left wing of the Democratic Party. However, Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy are talking confidently about trying to get this thing through Congress, the House and the Senate. But of course, they don't have much time. The deadline that's been given by the US Treasury is June the 5th.
Jessica Barker there. Well, live now to Richard Duncan, who's an economist and author of The Money Revolution, How to Finance the Next American Century. Richard, they've not gone as far as that, have they, financing the next American century? A deal, however, has been done, but at what cost?
So the economy and the stock market won't collapse. Next, it's very important for the United States to invest in its future. The Infrastructure Act, there won't be any draconian spending cuts at all. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security won't be touched. Defense spending will increase by 3.5%, and non-defense spending will be flat next year, but increase by 1% the year after that. So overall, government spending will continue to increase, and that will support economic growth in the U.S. The only real damage that looks like it would result from all of this is the reputational damage to the United States that will result from a group of Republicans in Congress threatening to force the U.S. government to default on its debt.
Now, Richard, I mean, President Biden was quite muted in his response. He's been quite quiet in the week in the run-up to this. But do you believe that Biden would have actually been politically strong enough to withstand the alternative to a deal, i.e. something actually just being rejected outright by Congress?
Well, no president of any party should be in a situation where the U.S. government is being held hostage by whatever party. So he was in an unfortunate position. But I think this deal demonstrates what a great deal maker President Biden is. These acts that I've referred to earlier, they represent the most sweeping legislation to go through Congress in decades. And this is just one more example of this deal. It's one more example of his ability to negotiate in Washington and to get things done at a minimum cost in a bad situation.
Now, some have suggested that Biden should invoke the 14th Amendment, which states that the validity of US debt should not be questioned and just borrow on constitutional grounds. Would that work? And is there a precedent for that?
There is no precedent to that. And it might work, but it's uncertain. It would be tested in the courts. And so the outcome that we appear to have reached is superior to that. The cost of reaching this debt ceiling standoff agreement is relatively small, and all of his priorities are being maintained. So I think he's taking the right approach.
Richard Gordon, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Now let's talk about Argentina, because it has one of the world's highest inflation rates. You thought Turkey was bad. How about more supply of US dollars is falling? So the government has agreed a deal where it's going to be paying for imported goods with Chinese yuan. Now, last month, Argentina activated a currency swap with China, allowing it to pay just over $1 billion worth of its imports this month in the Chinese currency. And today, the Argentine economy minister, Sergio Massa, is traveling to China to seek even greater use of the yuan in foreign trade. Well, let's speak now to Patrick Reed, who's the co-founder of the Adamis Principle. It's a consultancy specializing in global currency markets. And China has been touting this international usage, Patrick, of its currency as a rival to the US dollar for some time now. How successful has that been with other countries?
It's really not that great in significance, purely because if you look at the Bank of International Settlements statistics, the dollar is 88, constitutes of 88% of global transactions, whereas the Chinese yuan or renminbi is just 4%. So what we really need to unpack here is what constitutes a global reserve. There needs to be a lot of it, and there isn't a lot of the yuan. It needs to be free flow, and that is not free flow because it's a managed float, and people need to trust it too. So there is some issue around the yuan to become a credible replacement. You know, the dollar separating US policy, which is very separate to the actual currency. The dollar is the international oxygen for all countries, and I just see that remaining like that for some time to come.
The oxygen, but for how long? I mean, do you think its dominance will ever really be disrupted?
Well, you just have to ask all of the countries, essentially. We would all love to see credible alternatives, but the maths doesn't work. It just doesn't. And so you've got to really unwind the entire Middle East, because that's pegged to the dollar. You've got to really ask each country, the countries that really don't like the dollar or the US policy, it's better the devil you know. And it really comes down to how easy it is to trade, how easy that is. And dollar really is the number one. I mean, let's just take the easiest option, the second most popular currency in the world, the euro, has taken well over 2 decades to get to around 15 to 20% of total global transactions. And that, by many participants, is seen as the easiest option. With the renminbi, you have a whole new complex of issues that need to be solved. But it is a more of a sticking plaster, I would say, with Argentina.
Patrick, thank you very much for your time. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
Grace spoke to me just moments before serving.
As you know, street food business before that, so it's about 7 years of hard work, and yeah, it's sad.
As food and utility prices rose and customer numbers fell, it became too difficult to stay open.
People are struggling, and there's less money to go around, and obviously eating out is a luxury.
But Grace's story reflects many others in the capital, particularly in central London, where more than 500 venues have closed in the last 3 years. Back in Walthamstow, Grace will now be selling her food to shops, one way to keep her brand alive at a time when it wasn't possible to keep her restaurants open.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Now, of Thomas Dolby. You might be more familiar with him as the star of music for new media at Johns Hopkins University, and his credentials in the tech industry go back a long way. David Harper caught up with him.
Up next we have Thomas Dolby, or to put it another way, here comes Thomas Dolby. Take it away, Tom.
In the 1980s onwards, I was a songwriter, synthesist, singer. Later in my career, I moved into technology and had a high-tech school that had a portable cassette player. And that was when I got the name Dolby. And it sort of stuck with me and became my professional name when I went into music.
We're talking a lot about people being pigeonholed and people maybe in the tech industry not being taken seriously as a creative and vice versa. But you somehow managed to build a persona that combined the two together.
Well, I'm also a songwriter, you know, and most of my songs I could sort of play you on the piano and sing. And there was this disco lighting.
I could do more with this technology. I could produce something, I could build it into something else. Or was it
for them? You know, after that, formed my own software company once I got hooked. This is the early days of the internet, and there were venture capitalists roaming Silicon Valley looking for any kind of wacky idea that you could sketch out on the back of an envelope, and they would pull out their checkbook, you know. So when the bubble burst at the end of the dot-com era, a lot of little startups went by the wayside, and we probably would have done the same had it not been for one deal that we had, which was with Nokia phones.
Nokia. It remembers because it's human to forget.
Maria?
Nokia.
Connecting people. When you hear that dreaded ringtone, you know, it would become, then yes, I felt responsible, but not in a good way.
It is difficult to put to it.
I think stimulated by being in an area where I didn't. So I've always had this restlessness, you know, to move on to the next thing. Yeah.
Cost of living. A voluntary agreement with major retailers could see price reductions on basic food items like bread and milk. This comes as food prices rose to 19.1% in the year to April, the second highest rate in 45 years. Let's speak now.
The interesting thing about the supermarkets generally is they are a very fine margin business. So the difference between costs and the prices we pay on average around 1.5% or 2%. So there's not much margin in there as a starting point. And most particularly, if you start messing about and reducing particularly supermarket prices, it means that will mean we rely more on overseas suppliers rather than just local.
Inability at the British Resale Consortium said that the plans will not work. Is there any money left in the supply chain, do you think? Can it be squeezed?
Well, it's interesting. The UK is dominated really by 6 larger supermarket groups, and already they compete very fiercely to the degree that in certain areas we've already seen some of the suppliers are operating at losses. Eggs, perhaps a recent example, milk has been a good example in the past. And so ultimately, you've got already the suppliers under huge pressure. And so, yes, we want to keep our inflationary pressures kind of constrained, but if we do so at the cost of the suppliers, it's going to be a period of victory, really.
It's for a long time sticky, this inflation. Why is it that we can't get it down in this country and in other
different factors? The energy prices have peaked out, and that's a really important ingredient, not just in energy, but of course in all other aspects. So the food industry is hugely dependent on the price of energy. That has come down enormously. That's been offset, unfortunately, by it looks as though going forward as though any energy prices are coming down. So we actually see the cost of food.
So they're still rising, but not necessarily rising as for day. Speaking of bank holidays, a number of countries around Monday in many European countries. In the UK, we've had quite a bumper pack of public holidays this year. Currently, 9 of the top 10 most productive OECD countries, continental Europe, a block with more public holidays than anywhere else in the world. Let's speak now to Surin Thuru, who is Economics Director at the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales.
Overall, so there'll be some sectors such as retail, tourism, hospitality do really well, particularly when you have event-based holidays like the Coronation saw recently. But on the flip side, most of the economy is for businesses in the wider economy is whether this output is temporarily lost or permanently lost, i.e. can businesses make up what they can't do on the Monday through the rest of the week and the rest of the month. And that depends on business to business.
Now, when you look at the sort of various constituents of, let's say, just take the UK economy, manufacturing is a small proportion and shrinking, yet things like consumer spending and services is actually quite high. So is there not an argument to say that whatever we can do to boost the greater
economies where consumer spending and particularly spending on leisure is a high proportion of the wider economy, and that is true in the UK. It is a relatively high proportion. But what you will see really close together. So the individual impact of reducing retail spending, consumer spending more generally, may be more reduced, particularly in a period where households in particular are struggling with the cost of living crisis.
Now, there have been more calls for the working week to be reduced to 4 days a week.
COVID as well has increased the conversation where more people are looking for a better work-life balance. And I think for certain sectors, for example, those who rely on, can easily adapt to the online world, services, business services type sectors can easily adapt. I think that's where there'll be a disparity in the wider economy. And yes, this 4-day week is whether it can increase well-being, increase morale of workforce, and also increase productivity, rather than simply trying to cram 5 days work into 4.
Sir Thuru, thank you very much for your time. I think there's high productivity in the Thuru household. I don't think I've ever seen a cleaner kitchen. Let's have a quick look at the market, shall we? Asian shares mostly higher after that debt deal for the US debt ceiling. Tokyo, Sydney, Shanghai, all advancing. Hong Kong fell actually, and markets in Seoul are closed for the holiday. In fact, you can see it there, the Nikkei is raised by chip making and financial stocks. I'll see you very soon.
Hello there. Some of you may have seen the fabulous halo effect around the sun on Sunday evening. It was caused by thin high cloud made up of ice crystals. And just like a rainbow, you can get a double halo effect. There'll be some of that high cloud around on Bank Holiday Monday. For much of the country, it is going to be a dry and sunny day. But it'll be a chilly start. And there could be some cloud coming in off the North Sea through the Midlands and eastern parts of England. It'll break up through the day with some sunshine coming through. Away from the far north of Scotland, there will be a lot of sunshine. It's going to be strong sunshine as well. High UV levels for many of us on Monday. And that sun could be quite deceptive when it breaks through the cloud in the southeast, because there'll be a cooler, stronger wind blowing in here. And it'll be windy through the English Channel. Maybe a bit cooler in the southeast as well. But further north and west, it's going to be warming up. Temperatures back up to 20 or 21 Celsius in northwest England and Scotland. And Bank Holiday Monday will be dry because we've still got high pressure in charge. To the south of that high pressure, there's still some stronger winds across southern parts of England. By Tuesday, there's more cloud in the North Sea. With the wind off the North Sea, we could see cloud lingering into the afternoon across some eastern parts of England. It's always going to be sunnier further west. It's always going to be warmer further west as well. Temperatures widely into the low 20s, perhaps 24 degrees in Glasgow. Quick look at Wednesday, because there's some changes. There's more low cloud around for England and Wales. It could linger in Scotland. Very unusual not to hit 25 degrees in May. The last time that happened was way back in 2013, when we reached 25 Celsius on June the 6th. There were some quite chilly springs in the 80s, 87 in particular. We didn't reach 25 degrees until very late in June. We could hit the mid-20s again through Thursday and Friday, more towards the southwest of the UK. If you're wondering where all the rain's gone, it's in southern parts of Europe. Not great if you're holidaying in the Mediterranean. Far better to be holidaying here in the UK. That high pressure is not going anywhere. All week, it looks like it's going to be fine and dry with some warm sunshine and some cooler winds in the far south.
Radio 1's Big Weekend, live in Dundee. Bruce Capaldi. Ray. Wet Leg. To 1975 and many more. Let's take you closer to the music. Radio 1's Big Weekend. Watch now on BBC iPlayer. Listen on Sounds. Police emergency. There's a bloke in the water. You need to get someone out here.
Obviously, we're all thrilled about the body count doubling. Some tension is clearly important, just not too much.
Nicola Walker heads an all-star cast in Anakin. Press red for all episodes on BBC iPlayer.
It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me. And I'm feeling good.
Meet the Knights, EastEnders, Thursday at 7:30 on BBC One and iPlayer.
EastEnders.
Hello, welcome to Bank Holiday Monday morning on BBC One. 6 o'clock now, as usual, time for breakfast.
Good morning. Welcome to breakfast with Roger Johnson and Nina Warhurst.
Morning, our headlines today. Supporters of Turkey's President Erdogan celebrate into the night as he wins 5 more years in power, but his rival claims the election was unfair.
ITV confirms this morning will air today as normal after days of controversy over Philip Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague.
Good morning from Pearl and me here at the Horse Centre in Coatbrook in Cheshire. Tickets for all sorts of days out are getting more expensive this half term than they were a year ago. So I've come down here to meet some of the residents and also give you some advice on how you can save money on days out this holiday.
And in sport, a dramatic last day in the Premier League. Everton survive, but Leicester and Leeds fans will be contemplating life outside of English football's top tier as they wake up this morning.
But here at Kenilworth Road in the next few months, they will be hosting Premier League football for the first time. But before that, here in Luton Town this afternoon, there's going to be a party underway to celebrate their promotion.
Also this morning, we're going to be finding out why there's been an increase in honeybee swarms this year.
Good morning. It's the start of the meteorological summer this Thursday, and the weather this week is looking settled. At times, there'll be some cloud around. There'll also be some sunshine. It's going to be mostly dry, but also at times a chilly breeze across the southeast and the far south of England. I'll have all the details later in the programme.
Morning to you. It's Monday, the 29th of May. Our main story this morning, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has secured another 5 years in power after winning the country's most important election in years.
Well, Mr. Erdogan appealed for national unity as he celebrated victory last night over his opponent Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who declared that the result was unfair. Our correspondent Aruna Iyengar has this report.
Ecstatic Erdogan supporters outside the presidential palace in Ankara last night. Earlier in the day, the president had sung to the crowd and recited a poem. This Erdogan supporter says, "Bye-bye, Mr. Kemal. Thank God Islam has won."
We are very happy, full of joy. I can't even contain myself. I thank God.
Big celebrations, but they don't show that this was the biggest challenge to Mr. Erdogan's authority in years. He became Prime Minister in 2003, later becoming President. To build up that position, he has stifled all opposition. His non-religious rival, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, says the election was unfair. Mr. Erdogan had one big advantage, almost total control of the media. Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu's CHP party had campaigned against crackdowns on dissent and for a return to an independent justice system and parliamentary democracy. A somber mood here as the results came out.
I am really sad. I think the country is heading towards the darkness. I think it is not looking good for the future of our children and grandchildren.
He left the CHP headquarters in tears. World leaders have been congratulating Mr. Erdogan. He enjoys a big role internationally, a friend to countries in the East, while being a member of NATO. He's also put himself forward as a mediator in the Russia-Ukraine war. But it's back home where divisions may be hard to heal. Inflation is high and rebuilding cities after the earthquakes in February are a massive challenge. Mr. Erdogan promised in his victory speech to return Syrian refugees back to their homeland. Anti-immigrant feeling in Turkey has been growing. October will see the centenary of the Turkish Republic. Mr. Erdogan says he's confident about the future. Others are less convinced. Aruna Iyengar, BBC News.
Let's speak with our reporter Özge Özdemir, who's in Istanbul. It was a very close call. How significant is this outcome?
It is very significant because it's going to be determining the 5 years ahead of Turkish economics, Turkish politics. The discourse of Erdogan has been based on the national security and protecting the place of Turkey in international arena. But Kılıçdaroğlu, his main opposition, the opposition leader, has been promising to end the economic crisis and promising democracy and justice for the country. But it is being seen that the supporters of Erdogan are still loving him and are behind him.
Many thanks for your time.
Now, the Metropolitan Police says that it will stop attending emergency calls involving mental health incidents from September unless there's an immediate threat to life. The BBC understands that the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, wrote to Health and Social Care Services last week, outlining the need for officers to concentrate on their primary role of fighting crime. The Met says that in total, forces across England and Wales are spending just under 1 million hours a year waiting in hospitals for people who need urgent care.
This morning will air on ITV as normal today, as the network insists there are no plans to axe the show in the wake of Philip Schofield's resignation.
Let's go live to Sancha Berg. She's outside Television Centre in London for us this morning. So business as usual there, Sancha, this morning, we expect, after a fairly frenetic few days.
Well, that's right. It's over the weekend that we learned that Philip Schofield had a relationship with a younger colleague on this morning, that he had met that younger colleague when he was, in fact, a schoolboy, though the relationship didn't start for several years after that when he came to work on this morning. Now, obviously, Holly Willoughby's commented, ITV have commented. They've said there were rumours of the relationship in 2020, which were investigated, and they were found to be just hearsay. But other people have been coming out and talking, for example, the former resident doctor on this morning, Dr. Ranj Singh, who said that there was a toxic culture at the programme, though he said he didn't know about the relationship. He said he reported that culture to ITV. They had an external review, and they said last night that they found no evidence of bullying or discrimination. So obviously a very difficult morning for the team at this morning, who, as far as we can tell, haven't materialised yet. We're waiting for Dermot O'Leary, Alison Hammond, we understand, are likely to present this morning, but no sign of them yet.
All right, Sancha, thank you very much indeed.
7 men will appear in court today, charged with the attempted murder of senior Northern Irish police officer John Caldwell. Detective Chief Inspector Caldwell sustained life-changing injuries after he was shot outside a sports complex in Armagh, County Tyrone in February.
A 5-year-old girl has died following a house fire in Wales. Alicia Salisbury died at the scene of the blaze in Pembrokeshire on Saturday night. Police say they'll work with the fire service to establish the cause of the fire.
People impacted by major traumatic events will be offered government-backed help for the first time after an expansion of services. Witnesses of murders and major tragedies like the Grenfell Tower fire will be able to access help from the charity Victim Support from Thursday. The changes also include more support for children affected by these incidents and could see help given to an extra 1,200 people every year.
It was a day of heroics and of heartbreak in the Premier League as the season came to a dramatic end yesterday.
Oh, all going on, wasn't it? Relief for Everton fans. They survived the drop with a 1-0 win over Bournemouth. What a dismal weekend for Leicester and Leeds, both heartbroken with that relegation.
Many quick to share their reaction yesterday on social media, including the former Leicester City player Gary Lineker, of course, their most famous fan. He said he's absolutely gutted, but glad it's Everton. Of course, he played for Everton as well. And he's got a lot of love for that great football club. Congratulations.
And the Leeds goalkeeper, Joel Robles, tweeted saying, "We want to say sorry. We didn't complete the objective. It's very painful. I'm very proud to be part of this fantastic club this season. Thank you for your support in the good and the bad moments."
Well, outside Goodison Park in Liverpool, Everton's home ground, of course, their supporters could breathe a sigh of relief after what was a nerve-wracking afternoon.
We are happy, of course we're happy, but it's more relief than anything.
I went to Kenya with Everton community this year. That's how much I love my club, right? And they have just rewarded me.
Jerry Baines!
I love Everton more than my kids.
We couldn't even imagine going down to that. I can't describe it. Actually. You've got to be an Evertonian to know.
The whole day was like a build-up of stress, but at the end it was just relief. I think it was just
Like that.
No, it was like that. Yeah.
Made up. I think that we've done it today, but we've done it. Up the toppies.
This has been the longest week ever, and that just can't happen again. My chest is flooded. It's awful, awful.
Oh, the drama.
Some quite disappointed children in one household.
They weren't watching. Mummy didn't mean it. So massive relief there. Jane will be here with a full rundown of the weekend's drama in our sports bulletin a little bit later on.
Yeah, we'll stay with football because Luton are celebrating their move into the top flight. They're having a victory parade today through Luton.
Yeah, lots of fans, thousands will be expected to line the streets at lunchtime. Matt Braveling will be among them. How's prep going, Matt?
I cannot wait, Nina. Welcome to Kenilworth Road, home of the Hatters since 1905. And I think I speak for the majority of football fans when I say I'm very excited that this stadium will be hosting Premier League football, top flight football for the first time in 31 years. Of course, the Hatters' first time ever in the Premier League. They did it in dramatic style, didn't they? On the weekend when they beat Coventry City 6-5 in the penalty shootout. Rob Edwards' men just 10 years ago, less than 10 years ago, were in the 5th tier. They were in the conference and now they're in the Premier League. Everyone here, needless to say, is very excited. And as you said, there will be a party going on underway today. If I'm honest, I'm not sure the party stopped since the final whistle and the penalty shootout at Wembley, but they will continue here today because just before midday, a bus will leave Kenilworth Road and it will be going through Luton, only around a mile to St George's Square, where music and big screens will be from about 10:30, and then at 12:15 the players will get off that bus and they'll be talking to the fans. There'll be the mayor there who's going to be joining me here on BBC Breakfast a little bit later as well, and Rob Edwards, I'm sure, will say a few words to congratulate this team on a historic promotion. And what a day, what a season it will be for Luton Town.
They're going to like you as well. You've got a Luton coloured tie on, blending in nicely. Well done, Matt. Thank you very much.
These things aren't thrown together.
No, it's all with little details.
It's the detail, isn't it? It's 12 minutes past 6 now. Mars bars are going retro. The manufacturer is ditching plastic wrappers for paper in an attempt to be more environmentally friendly.
Yeah. Back in the day. The new chocolates will be available soon as part of the pilot scheme. Mars bars first went on sale in 1932. They were wrapped in paper. Plastic packaging used until 1977. When a Mars a day helps you work, rest and play.
Obviously, I just want a chocolate bar now. Even at 12 minutes past 6. Let's go to Tarporley in Cheshire, where the sun is rising. Look at that. Is that mist on the grass? Or is it a camera that needs a slight polish? Either way, it's very atmospheric.
Looks fantastic, doesn't it? Carol's a lovely morning in Tarporley. I don't know if you can see that picture in Cheshire, but fantastic weather.
It is indeed, Roger. I was just thinking, Nina, name and shame, girl. Cameraman.
I think it is mist on the grass, whichever cameraman is there.
Let's go backpedaling furiously, but we'll move on. Good morning, everybody. If you are out there first thing, it's a chilly start to the day. Some temperatures are right down close to freezing, so do bear that in mind. For many of us, this bank holiday, though, it's going to be a sunny one, and it's going to be mainly dry. There is some cloud around, though. We've got it currently across the northern and western Isles. Here you can see the odd spot of rain coming out of it. Cloud 2 coming from the North Seas, romped a bit further inland, but through the morning into the afternoon that will tend to break up, and a lot of us will have some sunshine. Breezy, though, across the southeast and the English Channel. Now, in the sunshine, worth bearing in mind, UV levels are high, and across much of England and Wales today, pollen levels are also high. We're looking at a cold wind if you're out and about today, and that will see the edge of the temperatures across the southeast and the English Channel, and temperatures along the North Sea coastline 12 to about 14, maybe 15, 16 degrees. Move towards the west, we're looking at highs up to 21, so not as warm as it was in Plymouth yesterday when we saw just over 24 degrees. Through this evening and overnight then, we still have always cloud across the north and west of Scotland. More cloud comes in on the breeze from the North Sea and sweeps over towards the Midlands and possibly as far west as East Wales. Still a brisk breeze in the south. These are overnight lows But where we've got the clear skies, especially in rural areas, temperatures once again could fall very close to freezing for some. So it does mean there could well be a touch of frost first thing in the morning. Tomorrow we still have this cloud which has come in overnight. Some of it will burn away, but a lot of it will be stubborn to clear back towards the north and the west. Here's where we'll see the sunshine. Still that brisk breeze across the south and the east, with highs up to potentially, Nina and Roger, 24, maybe even 25 in the Glasgow area.
Oh, that is warm, isn't it? Do you enjoy the hot weather, Carol?
I do. My favourite is 28 though, just a little bit warmer.
Oh, she's a summer girl.
Specific temperature, Carol. It's not attention to detail.
She knows what she wants.
I certainly do, Nina. Yes, and like you, it's chocolate right now. I've been speaking about it. It would be nice.
We're going to have to get some chocolate, aren't we? Once you start thinking about it, you can't get the genie back in the bottle. See you in a bit, Carol.
Thank you.
6:15 now. Over the last 5 decades, the cult pop band Sparks have often been described as unsung heroes or the biggest band you've never heard of.
Really?
No.
Oh.
Says more about me than
Probably.
anything else.
Well, after selling out the Albert Hall twice this year and announcing a headline gig at the Hollywood Bowl, it seems those terms no longer apply. Our arts correspondent David Silito went to meet them.
We are Sparks, dude.
Please welcome Sparks.
Most pop careers start with a bang, and then it's a slow fade. But not with Sparks. Russell had the voice, Ron the moustache, and the songwriting talent. And 50 years after writing This Town Ain't Big Enough for Both of Us, they're suddenly drawing the biggest crowds of their career. You're selling out not one but 2 nights at the Royal Albert Hall.
Yes, you sound even more surprised than we are, you know.
We were huge Anglophiles when we were growing up, you know, and getting our musical kind of inspiration early on. And part of all of that was this iconic Royal Albert Hall that just to us was like, oh my God, it's the kind of the pinnacle.
Over the years, there have been 26 albums, many ups and downs, and a glorious determination to never give up.
There isn't anything else that we can do. We're pretty hopeless in any other situation. So we kept plowing on.
And now, even though their ages are like most personal details about them, a bit of a mystery, they're enjoying a glorious Indian pop summer in what is probably their mid to late 70s.
Was this what you planned all along? This was your plan for your career?
Of course,
Yeah.
it's just natural.
It's
you know.
all, we had it all charted out.
Looks like it's a repeat.
So what explains it all? Determination to keep on creating new singles that are attracting fans whose parents weren't even born when they started, and a recent documentary.
Are you brothers? We are brothers. How did you first meet?
We are brothers.
In which many famous names revealed their secret love of all things Sparks.
The documentary, all the people who, they love you. Was that a surprise?
It is. It's satisfying knowing that we've both been able to retain people that appreciate what we did a while ago, but also that there are brand new people coming in that kind of assume that we're a new band just from the music is something that really is inspiring to us.
And finally, for Ron, who has for more than 50 years stayed true to that look and a slightly static stage presence, there has been in recent years an innovation. The Ron dance.
And the dance. Can I be doing the dance?
I hate to ruin any surprises, but there might be. My audience won't allow me to retire the dance.
So there it is. After 50 years, Ron and Russell are having a moment. David Silento, BBC News.
I think I've done the wrong dance.
We can learn it later, Roger.
I'm sure I've done it.
I think you'd be brilliant at that. I was just thinking, I saw that in 1994.
Did you?
Supporting Blur. So they have been around a long time. And even then, there was this army of loyal fans. So it's great that they're having another moment in the sun, isn't it? And let's have a look at what the front pages are saying this morning. We begin with The Guardian, reporting that the Metropolitan Police will no longer attend emergency calls related to mental health incidents. It says officers will be ordered not to attend thousands of calls every year to deal with such problems.
The Telegraph leads with that story that we were reporting yesterday and again today to create a food price cap at supermarkets, or at least the plans for it. The paper reports that the Prime Minister's been warned that the scheme could result in food shortages.
This morning, presenter Holly Willoughby makes the front page of The Mirror, which reports she's pledged to stick with the programme. That's despite calls for ITV bosses to axe the show. It comes after the departure of co-host Philip Schofield and those revelations he had an affair with a younger colleague.
And this beach scene in Dorset makes the front of the Times. Looks like sunlight, not quite done. Temperature soared to 24.4 degrees this weekend, making it, as Carol's been telling us, the warmest day of the year so far.
Beautiful way.
Actually, I couldn't quite see it. It's not. On the subject of the warm weather, so I'll just quickly show you this from inside the sun. It's also a picture. I think that one is sunlight. Here we go. It's talking about the number of barbecues that are going to be had over the course of the weekend. All the burgers, 56 million sausages, 16 million burgers, 135 million cans of or bottles of beer. But the best bit is this picture up here, if you can get in on it. This was from Cornwall and St Agnes, I think, yesterday. Somebody had left their car on the beach on Saturday, forgot to come back and get it. So the BMW was swamped by the rising tide. A few people commenting online, making the point that did the sea not realise that BMWs can park where they like? And a bit of a dig at BMW drivers, I think. But
And usually they pull out as they like as well, but not that one, I don't think. It's Pet's Corner over here. What do you fancy, a grumpy cat or a massive malage?
I'll take them both.
Take either. So this is Feline Flash, the former street cat who can't find an owner because of his grumpy look. Have a little look at Flash here.
It's
So
grumpy.
Flash is 9 years old. He's attracted interest because of his age and his demeanour. He's been living on the streets for 7 years after his owner emigrated.
Well, you would feel a bit grumpy, wouldn't you, if your owner had moved out of the country?
Was it something I said or did? He struggles to trust people, has a lovely temperament. But this is quite encouraging. So it says, Flash's despondent expression recalls of Tardar Source, the cat who shot to fame in 2012 for his permanent scowl. Apparently went viral and then appeared in 15 TV adverts and released 15 best-selling books in 15 languages.
There you go. Oh, there's hope for him after all.
How does a cat release 15 best-selling books? Anyway.
Go on, tell us about the mallard.
Oh, it's just a massive mallard. There we go. A massive mallard causing mayhem on...
Massive mallard.
Same to you. The Crackers Quacker named Duckzilla gobbles up all the bread thrown by locals in Sleaford. Someone who lives nearby says he has a lot of attitude. Possibly it's a mallard crossed with a domestic duck, which is slightly bigger. I mean, you see it to scale slightly with that little girl who's taking her life in her hands running towards it. There we go.
Right.
Enough pet watch.
6:23. You can tell us a bank holiday. Some of the stories in the papers. It's a bank holiday and a school half term, of course, for many families. But are rising prices putting you off from going to a tourist attraction, for example?
Really makes you think twice at the moment, doesn't it? We've sent Ben to Cheshire in search of top tips for a day out on a budget.
After a massive mallard, a giant horse.
Morning from Lagan and myself, and you might be able to see the legs of Lagan's foal just back there as well, just being prepared for a county show. And at the Shire Horse Centre in Coatbrook, they have all sorts of animals. They've got these magnificent creatures. They've got cats, they've got ducks, they've got pigs, all sorts. You may catch sight of them throughout the course of the morning. But the reality is, this half term, tickets for days out to tourists are more expensive, significantly more expensive than they were a year ago. The BBC asked 15 of the top paid for and they said that many of them have had to put up is, in some cases, by more than the general rate of inflation, which is at 10%. The sites that a rising cost, which is why they have to pass to the people coming to visit. The problem is 40% of people who took part in a survey said that higher prices have actually put them off going to visitor attractions, and those that do still go say they're spending less at gift shops and cafes and the like. So if you are wanting to get out and about this half term in glorious weather, what can you do to beat the rising costs? Well, you could go to a free museum. That would save you money. Or often, if you use coupons or maybe book in advance, you can get significant sums of money as well. Let's find out how they do things here at the centre. We to Janet, who owns the centre. Oh, and we've got, who's this here, Nick?
Coatbrook Loch Broom.
Broom.
One of our brood mares, who is, as you can see, very, very heavily pregnant. In fact, she's 6 days overdue. So she's just enjoying her morning breakfast.
Oh, lovely.
Janet, tell us tickets to try and make it affordable for people this to come here.
Well, we offer, once people have paid their full price admission, we offer a free return visits for a month. That's unlimited for a whole month. So people that come to visit us today, the 29th of May, they can come back for free as often as they like until the 28th of June. And that's a fantastic opportunity for people with families. It's so expensive to go and have a day out and look to do something different or something every day. It's a huge cost. So to come here every day, they'll see something different for free for a whole month.
Okay. And Broom here. Let's just leave our viewers with a little shot of Broom here enjoying breakfast. I mean, isn't that a beautiful sight this morning?
Oh, well, she's 6 days overdue, Ben. You might have some extra treats in store for you this morning.
Yeah.
Oh, she's off. She doesn't like the sound of that. She's not ready.
Sorry for
You
the
take
glitches.
your time,
Yeah,
Broom.
bit glitchy that, wasn't it, from the stables this morning? If you've been for a big day out this bank holiday, or if you're just enjoying the sunshine at home, send us a picture. We'd love to see it.
Oh, yeah, cheer us up. We love seeing your
and
bank
do the
holiday
WhatsApp.
pics. Yeah, you can do. Up you go. You can do the QR code there, or 0330 123 0440. Don't forget to say who you are and where you're messaging from, or via the traditional means: email, Twitter @BBC Breakfast.
Right, it's 6:27. Let's get a first look at the news, the travel, and the weather wherever you are this morning.
Hello to you, very good Monday morning. I'm Edward Salt with the news here in the south. Detectives on the Isle of Wight are continuing to question 3 people this morning on suspicion of murder following a stabbing in Ryde. Emergency services were called to Park Road in the early hours of Sunday morning. A man in his 30s had been seriously injured and died on his way to hospital. 2 27-year-old men from Sandown and Ryde and a 24-year-old woman from Shanklin have been arrested. Residents have spent a second night in a temporary accommodation after a fire at an apartment in Basingstoke on Saturday. 80 firefighters from across Hampshire dealt with the fire in Oak Ridge Road. Around 30 properties were affected. An investigation is underway into the cause of the fire. The housing association Vivid is providing funds for tenants to buy emergency supplies, while the council says it plans to work with voluntary partners to set up a donation scheme to help displaced families. People heading to Dorset this weekend during the school half-term break are being urged to leave only footprints. Around 2,000 tonnes of rubbish were collected by Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council from its miles of sandy beaches last year. The council is appealing to visitors to help cut the cost of the daily clean-up by taking all litter to colour-coded bins for waste and recycling. Water bottle filling stations along the seafront have already helped cut the number of discarded plastic bottles. Now, some of Britain's best climbers are in the New Forest this weekend for the Southern Tree Climbing Competition. Every competitor has to be qualified, so entrants are all trained tree surgeons or arborists. They took on a series of challenges based on speed, rope throwing and navigating their way around the tree. The winners go on to represent Britain in the European and World Championships later this year.
It's really challenging to be fast but not scrappy. So it's almost a case of being slow and smooth is actually faster.
It keeps you very fit. You know, you have to be very agile. You have to be very sharp-minded also.
I love climbing. I love trees. I love all the people, the support. It's like having a big campfire just climbing trees. It's brilliant.
Let's get the forecast this morning with Bea Tucker.
Hi, good morning. We had the warmest day of the year yesterday, and many places across the south saw temperatures in the low 20s. Today will be that little bit cooler, both with lower temperatures and a keen northeasterly breeze. So we have got plenty of sunshine. I think we're still feeling warm where we get the brightness, but there will be a little bit more cloud building for some into the afternoon. That breeze noticeable for the Isle of Wight, the far south coast, and I think for all of us, a cooler, breezier day with highs of around 19, perhaps the odd 20 degrees. Through tonight, it stays quite breezy, clear skies as well. I think it will be chillier than last night, perhaps a bit of cloud feeding in to the far east, and temperatures could get down to around 5 or 6 degrees. So more cloud to begin tomorrow. I think there will be some decent spells of sunshine. Still breezy though, but the best of the sunshine into the afternoon. Temperatures do start to climb, so most places reaching 20, perhaps 21 degrees.
No major travel problems so far on the roads or on the rails for this bank holiday Monday. We'll keep you updated on that one throughout the course of breakfast. I'm back in half an hour's time here in the Room Roger. See you a bit later on. Bye for now.
Good morning, this is Breakfast with Roger Johnson and Nina Warhurst.
Morning, it's 6:30. Should we catch up on a busy bank holiday weekend of sport? Jane is here. I suppose the only place to start is at the bottom of the Premier League in England.
I know, it was just nail biting, wasn't it? Because it came down to literally the last minute. 3 teams on the last day. All of them could have been relegated, all of them could have survived, but it was Everton who survived, as you can see, just that absolute delight there. They had to win, and they did by 1 goal. But Leicester, who, don't forget, only won the Premier League in 2016, are going down, as are Leeds. So really devastating for them. So yes, a frantic 90 minutes, finishing in triumph or tears. The Premier League's final day saw Leicester and Leeds relegated, while Everton will stay up. Joe Linsky looks back on a dramatic day for fans across the country.
Leicester are relegated.
For 2 huge clubs, their greatest fear is now reality. Just 7 years ago, Leicester City were champions. Now the Foxes face up to relegation. They go down with Leeds United, whose 3-year stay has come to an end. On the last day of the season, 3 teams were on the tightrope, but Everton's future was in their hands. They've been in the top flight for 69 years. Now they just had to beat Bournemouth to stay there again. But at this stage, no game is straightforward. At half-time, it was 0-0, and at that stage, they were down. But in the second half, Everton exhaled.
I come to Decore, well hit! Oh, yes! Oh, what a strike from Abdoulaye Doucouré that is!
On this nervous afternoon, Abdoulaye Doucouré smashed through the tension. Everton had the goal they needed, and as Leicester listened in to Goodison, it was the worst news to hear. Leicester had to win and hope Everton slipped up. They did beat West Ham, but it was cruelly irrelevant.
I think we deserve it because we've not played well. Them players are not playing for this
Oh,
club.
no,
They're not playing for the shirts.
Devastated. He's been in tears. But your team's your team.
You know what? We'll rebuild, and everyone will get.
For Leeds, their last chance was a long shot. They had to beat Spurs just to stay in contention. Instead, Harry Kane picked them off. Leeds have changed their coach twice just this year. Even Sam Allardyce couldn't save this dark season.
Yeah, it's been very disappointing. I'm very disappointed for the fans and you know what they've seen, probably not just in my short time, but for most of the season. They've supported us. They're very entitled to show their disapproval.
It was the sequence of results they'd prayed for at Goodison, but it was tense right to the end.
What a save by Pickford!
In January, Everton brought in Sean Dyche as manager. Now, on the last day, he led them to safety.
And Everton have survived again!
To get it done this year is progression. Now we've got to progress further, recruit well. That's questionable over the years, not from me, from many people. How can you recruit? What money's available? We don't know. All them things. They're not for this moment in time, but trust me, I've got it all there because I've been living it for 4 months and I have been living it, by the way.
At times this year for Everton, it had looked bleak, and this is the second straight season where they've saved it at the end. For the team who've been in this league since 1954, it still means so much just to stay in it. Joe Linsky, BBC News.
Well, a day of reckoning awaits for either Sheffield Wednesday or Barnsley as they contest the League One playoff final at Wembley later today. The first two finals have been decided by penalties, and yesterday it was Carlisle's turn to enjoy a memorable day in the sunshine. Taylor Charters scored the decisive spot kick for Carlisle, sending them into League One next season at the expense of Stockport. Incredibly, Carlisle were second favourites to be relegated to the National League at the start of the season and had also never been promoted via the playoffs. In Scotland, Celtic ended their season on a high with a win in the Women's Scottish Cup final after narrowly missing out on claiming the league title last week. It was a tight first half, but 2 goals in quick succession in the second, including this header from Claire O'Riordan, gave Celtic the victory. It is the first time that the match has been held at Scotland's National Stadium, Hampden Park, and it sets a great example of the growth of women's football, as Captain Kelly Clark said afterwards.
It's a dream come true. I've watched Celtic men do that so many times in my 10 years at Celtic. To do it and to be down in history with such a special group of players again just feels amazing. And it's amazing that there's a crowd that includes lots of little girls that can now see what they can do in Scotland. This year for women's football has been unbelievable.
Tennis and Jack Draper and Cameron Norrie will fly the flag for Great Britain at the French Open today. And the two remain the only hope for any British success at Roland Garros this year. That's after Dan Evans was knocked out by Australian wildcard Tanasi Kokkinakis in straight sets on day 1 of the tournament. World number 25 admitted he was below par all match. Max Verstappen dominated a wet Monaco Grand Prix, leading from start to finish. Conditions were pleasant at the track to begin with, but then the rain added an element of jeopardy, causing multiple slips and slides in the straight track. However, Verstappen stayed strong and crossed the line first, with Fernando Alonso second and Esteban Ocon third. Lewis Hamilton was fourth, George Russell fifth, and Lando Norris ninth. Now, while the Monaco Grand Prix was fairly uneventful, that cannot be said for motor racing's other big event, the Indy 500. Fans there were fortunate not to be severely injured or even killed after this crash ended in a wheel breaking free from its tether, flying over the fences that are supposed to protect spectators. Luckily, it cleared the grandstand and it landed on a incredible scenes there, wasn't it? Now to cricket, and Moeen Ali will hope to play a key role in today's IPL final, as his Chennai Super Kings take on the reigning champions at Gujarat Titans. Yesterday's showpiece final was postponed until today because of heavy rain in Ahmedabad, with no play possible. Should today's reserve day suffer the same fate, well, the Titans will be crowned champions because they currently top the league title. Great Britain can put further daylight between themselves and second-placed India when they meet in the FIH Hockey Pro League London tournament this weekend. They currently lead India by 6 points, thanks in part to an impressive 3-1 victory over Olympic champions Belgium yesterday. Great Britain now have 6 wins from their 10 matches. Unfortunately, though, Great Britain's women's team were unable to make it a double over Belgium as they slumped to a 3-2 defeat. That loss means that they stay 5th in the 9-team competition. Now, for many, it is one of the most prestigious, but also one of the most dangerous events on 2 wheels. The Isle of Man TT Races begins today, and newcomer Jack Petrie will live out a boyhood dream when he makes his debut. Andy Moon has been along to see him.
It is the Glastonbury of motorcycle racing, the TT. I mean, the Isle of Man is the home of bikes, everyone knows that. And obviously, I've been there as a fan before when I was younger, and to be there as one of the riders is, yeah, it feels pretty special.
Flying down country roads at speeds of up to 160 miles per hour. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it's a lifetime passion for Jack Petrie.
I think everyone should experience it in their life, but I feel privileged to have experienced it, and yeah, I just want to keep going. But you know, the buzz is a massive part, but I want to be successful as well.
The buzz isn't without risk, though. The racing doesn't take place on a track, but on regular roads. Over 250 riders have died at the Isle of Man TT, including 5 in 10 days last year.
Part of the show as such for the fans is the risk element the riders take, but it's the buzz you get out of that. That is why I do it. I do it to be successful, but I want that buzz.
We know biking's not a cheap sport. How do you fund yourself?
I mean, we're sort of throwing tens of thousands of pounds in each year. The dream eventually is to do well enough to hopefully get me into a team one day, and that is the goal. But for now, we're just gonna have to do it off our own backs.
Jack is realistic with his goals for this year, but the invite is a huge step forward in a fledgling career.
Yeah, I am really excited. Yes, it was the dream when I first started racing. So to get the entry this year, I feel like I've got the experience now in road racing in general, having done the Northwest 200, the 700. I feel it's the right time for me to take that step.
Jack Petrie will follow in the footsteps of the sport's greats at barely believable speeds.
Andy Moon reporting there. Now, finally, I'm going to leave you with a story of putting your own disappointment behind you in order to help your friend succeed. Britain's Geraint Thomas said he felt pretty devastated after losing the Giro d'Italia to Slovenia's Primoz Roglic here in the pink leader's jersey. But rather than wallow, he helped lead his friend Mark Cavendish in the white there to victory on yesterday's final stage in Rome. Cavendish was short of teammates towards the end, and despite riding for a different team, Thomas helped position Cavendish for the final sprint, and he went on to claim his 17th and final Giro d'Italia victory, as he will be retiring at the end of the year. At 38, Cavendish is the oldest rider to win a Giro stage, and afterwards showed his gratitude to his old friend Thomas.
And also from the Isle of Man, Mark Cavendish.
Yes, good point.
Quick
Good
on
link
two
there.
wheels, just like
Yeah, very nice story though that he helped his friend.
What a lovely thing to do. What a lovely way to end. Thank you, Jane. It's just gone 20 to 7. Now, despite the energy price cap falling this week, you will know many of us are still paying a lot more for electricity than we used to.
Yeah, the government says that all of the UK's electricity will come from clean sources by 2035. So our reporter, Pete Simpson, has been finding out whether solar power might be part of the answer.
As the sun continues to beat down, those lucky enough to have these have been making hay. Domestic solar installations doubled last year compared to 2021, whilst the technology is also improving.
The issue with solar power has always been that you have to use the energy as it's being produced. But more often these days, people have found a way around that by installing these storage batteries that keep the energy to use at your leisure.
A system like this, though, with storage batteries, requires an outlay of over £10,000, and many struggling with bills out of the question.
You had to be careful about what you're turning on.
Turn all the mains off and everything now, so we can't afford to have it all plugged in, so we turn it all off.
Would you consider having solar panels put on the flat? Could you afford to do that?
I couldn't afford that, mate.
Really?
I'm a pensioner. I couldn't afford that. No.
This housing development in Lawrence Weston, though, offers a glimpse of what happens when you do solar at scale. Called water lilies, the homes are part of their own microgrid. More panels and bigger batteries, but the concept is the same. The firm behind it say this type of project should be standard in new builds.
If you put the solar panels on at the right time, you actually, when you're putting the roof on the building, you save on building tiles. If you do it as an integrated package and get it to scale, then it works. And it shouldn't be that the person buying the house who's taking on the cost. It should be the builders. We have to change that attitude of, build them cheap, run away, and actually build for the long term, get a proper policy in place, a proper structure.
For supersized solar, though, check out this new solar farm in South Gloucestershire. It's the first of its kind in the UK to be directly connected to the national grid. It comprises over 150,000 panels on land that used to be a dairy farm. With the government targeting all energy to be produced without carbon emissions by 2035, it may be that much more of the countryside looks like this in future.
Still a long way to go to meet that target, isn't it? That was it. Pete Simpson, excuse me, reporting.
Right, it's 7:15. I'm always really impressed. Carol never dodges a bank holiday for work. And today you've got a really good excuse. It's your birthday. Happy birthday, Carol.
Oh, happy birthday, Carol.
Thank you both. Honestly, I was trying to get the day off, but it was too late.
Honestly, if you can't get the day off, Carol, who can?
Oh, bless you, Roger. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. If you're just stepping out, for some of us, it's quite a chilly start to the day. Where we've got the cloud cover, temperatures aren't quite as low. But for many of us today, Bank Holiday Monday is going to be dry and it's going to be sunny as well. Now, high pressure is firmly in charge of our weather this week. The air around high pressure moves in a clockwise direction. It's been dragging in a bit more cloud from the North Sea, and we've got breezier conditions too, quite a brisk wind across East Anglia and the southeast, and that's a chilly wind. Now, through the day, the cloud that's coming overnight will start to break up. Some of it could linger on the east coast itself, and we've got further cloud across the north and the west of Scotland. But in between, a lot of dry weather and a fair bit of sunshine. But don't forget that cool wind. It will be with us as we go through the course of the day, tonight and tomorrow as well. Temperatures today could get up to about 21 degrees, and we'll see a lot of early evening sunshine. Now, as we head on through the evening and overnight, we hang on to the cloud up in the west. More comes in from the North Sea, extending through the Midlands into southern areas. It could get west as East Wales. And temperatures tonight falling away roughly in towns and cities to between 4 and 9 degrees. But locally, where we've got the clear skies, especially in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, we could see temperatures very close to freezing. So if you've been tempted into the garden in the last few days, do bear that in mind. Maybe cover your tender plants. Tomorrow then we start off with all this cloud. It will be quite extensive, low cloud. Some of it will be stubborn to clear, some of it won't clear at all, and also the Channel Islands. Temperatures ranging in the north to 22, but somewhere across central Scotland, more especially the Glasgow area, we could see 24 or 25. If we see 25, it's just making it into May by the skin of its teeth. We haven't had a 25 yet this year. Now, as we head on into Wednesday, still a lot of England, much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, we're looking at another dry day away from the far north where we've got that cloud. Remember, it's all toppling around an area of high pressure. Temperatures on Wednesday, we could get up to 25 in Glasgow. We could possibly even see 26. And this is the last day of the meteorological spring. Thursday is the first day of the meteorological summer. So the weather on Thursday, you can see we still have a fair bit of cloud coming down the east coast. It's not going to be as warm across Scotland and Northern Ireland as it will be on Wednesday and Thursday, but we'll have brighter skies as we come further south across southern parts of England and also Wales. But still this cool breeze bringing in the cloud from the North Sea. So here it will be cooler and temperatures up to about 21. Back to you both.
Thank you, Carol. Some nice warm temperatures to look forward to. Not as warm as Carol would like for a birthday, though. She disclosed
28.
earlier she likes 28. Only 28 will do.
I think older than her age. Many things to enjoy about the warm, sunny weather, of course, but it does have drawbacks too. You're more likely, for example, to see a swarm of bees.
Yeah, there's one descending on us right now, making me slightly uncomfortable. Our reporter Zoe O'Brien is at the University of Warwick this morning, so we need to be on guard. Not ideal if you're going for a nice sugary picnic this morning.
Well, it wouldn't be ideal to bump into a swarm of bees unless you've got all this protective gear on that I've got on. So it is a gloriously sunny start to the bank holiday Monday here in a special place at the University of Warwick because I'm in the apiary. Now, just behind me here, we've got 25 honeybee hives. So they're tended to by staff and students here. And as you said, you can tell we're deep into spring and that summer's on the way when we see swarms of honeybees. Now, one of the most interesting things that experts are telling us this year is that there are far more swarms than they've seen in previous years. In the Channel Islands, for example, they had just a handful last year. This year, collectors are really busy out there going to gather those swarms safely and get them away into hives. Now, they've told us to tell you the most important thing, if you do see a swarm, stay away from it.
They're a spectacular, often unexpected sight, bee swarms. They might give you a fright at first, but these fascinating clusters aren't looking to do you any harm. They're out searching for a new home. At this time of year, the old queen bee will sometimes leave the hive with some of her loyal subjects. They'll form a loud, buzzing cloud, usually settling after around 15 minutes, but they do land in unusual places. In Guernsey this year, they've already seen dozens of swarms, far more than last year.
So it is a really strange situation this year. No idea why. We've had to have a lot of swarms. It's a natural way of them increasing their population. All living things, whether it's a plant or an animal or an insect, want to reproduce, and bees want to reproduce. They want to make more colonies. So that's what they do.
In towns and cities, the swarms don't have as many options for staying out of your way. Nevertheless, you should keep your distance. At this point, they're usually drowsy, full up on sugar, but it's best to leave them well alone, keep children and pets away, and call in a professional to collect them.
Well, I'm joined now by Alan, who is one of the bee collectors and bee experts here at the University of Warwick. Alan, can you tell me, why are we seeing so many swarms this year?
Well, last year was an excellent year for the bees. So they entered the winter very, very strong. And what we saw when we had the long, cold, wet spring was that those colonies really built up. And as beekeepers, when we inspect a hive, we need about 15 degrees Celsius. And we just didn't have any of those days all through March and April. Meanwhile, the bees were building up and doing what they do. So the first nice sunny day, the bees have been making preparations, because when they're confined to the hive, it's a trigger for them to swarm. So it's a combination of weather and beekeeping activities that's really generated a lot of swarms this year.
Now, I just want to explain to you why you've come back to us. And Alan, can you just tell us, I mean, you look after 25 hives here, 40 in total. Why do you do it? Why do you get so much enjoyment out of it?
It's just something that I took up when I had about 8 years ago, and I just love it. Really puts you in touch with nature and what's going on. So it's such a wonderful hobby, and the honey is more of a byproduct. I just love to see the bees out there foraging, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful hobby.
Now let's introduce your wife. I think we've got Paddy coming. Paddy, come and join us. Paddy describes herself as a beekeeping widow, because this takes so much of Alan's time, doesn't it?
It certainly does. There's certain times of the year that it's bees, bees, bees all the time, really. But everybody loves the honey. All the locals like to buy it. We have so many repeat customers. People come from actually quite a distance to buy it these days. So certainly Alan enjoys it. Keeps him busy. Out my way.
But you haven't taken it up just yet yourself?
I haven't really. I've had occasionally help, but many years ago we both did a taster day and stuff, and just one of those things. I sort of just let Alan. It could be his thing, without me interfering.
Fantastic. Now I'm going to leave you for a moment. We're actually going to go and get closer to the ones here. Now, can you tell us what's going on inside this hive?
We're just going through and inspecting the hive. There's a baby bees that we can see here. So it's a bit early in the morning. They're a bit cold. They're a bit dopey, a bit like me, but they're kind of just get ready, and they're going to warm up, and they'll be flying soon to bring in all the forage.
Francesca, can I ask you, how long have you been doing this?
Just over a year, I'd say. So not so long, but I've been really enjoying it.
Do you not get scared? Because when I'm at home and I hear a buzz, it says to be honest.
No, not at all, actually. I think you get used to it and you kind of get really, really into it. It's nice to see them and you get to check up on them. So it's really, really enjoyable.
And the swarms we know is because the old queen bee moves out. Do you know where the queen bee is in here?
I think she's marked in this one, but it's a case of just looking out and seeing if we find her. So
She looks really different.
Yeah.
And she moves differently. Whereas these are pretty doing their stuff. The queen is kind of sinewy and she's kind of waltzing through, queen of her domain, really. So we might be able to find her later for you.
Fantastic. Now we've got just a short amount of time left. Alan has promised a bee fact. Alan, your best bee fact for the people at home.
So for £1 of honey, the bees will fly something like 50,000 miles.
That is a good fact. Now, of course, the important warning for everybody at home today, if you do see a swarm, go online, the Beekeepers Association website. They will put you in touch with your nearest collector. Just don't go near it yourself.
Good advice. Zoe, thank you very much indeed. I'm with Professor Dave. The bees are a bit sleepy at this time in the morning.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Aren't we all? It's just going up to 7 o'clock. Time to get. Oh, sorry. Now I was going to say news, travel, and weather where you are. We'll have that shortly, but still to come this morning. He used to cause mischief in the farmyard or got into trouble with Wallace and Gromit, but now Shaun the Sheep has a new job teaching how to behave properly in.
Hello to you, very good morning. I'm Edward Salt with the latest headlines from South Today at breakfast. Detectives on the Isle of Wight are continuing to question 3 people this morning on suspicion of murder following a stabbing in Ryde. Emergency services were called to Park Road in the early hours of Sunday morning. A man in his 30s had been seriously injured and died on his way to hospital. 2 27-year-old men from Sandown and Ryde and a 24-year-old woman from Shanklin have been arrested. Residents have spent the second night in temporary accommodation after a fire at apartments in Basingstoke on Saturday. 80 firefighters from across Hampshire dealt with the fire in Oak Ridge Road. Around 30 properties were affected. An investigation is underway into the cause of the fire. The housing association Vivid is providing funds for tenants to buy emergency supplies, while the council says it plans to work with voluntary partners to set up a donation scheme to help displaced families. People heading to the Dorset coast this week during the school half-term break are being urged to leave only footprints. Around 2,000 tonnes of rubbish were collected by Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council from its miles of sandy beaches last year. The council's appealing to visitors to help cut the cost of a daily clean-up by taking all litter to colour-coded bins for waste and recycling. Water bottle filling stations along the seafront have already helped cut the number of discarded plastic bottles. Now, some of Britain's best climbers are in the New Forest this weekend for the Southern Tree Climbing Competition. Every competitor has to be qualified, so entrants are all trained tree surgeons or arborists. They took on a series of challenges based on speed, rope throwing and navigating their way around the tree. Now, the winners go on to represent Britain in the European and World Championships later this year.
It's really challenging to be fast but not scrappy. So it's almost a case of being slow and smooth is actually faster.
It keeps you very fit. You know, you have to be very agile. You have to be very sharp-minded also.
I love climbing. I love trees. I love all the people, the support. It's like having a big campfire and just climbing trees. It's brilliant.
Let's get Bank Holiday Monday's weather forecast with Dee Tucker.
Hi, good morning. We had the warmest day of the year yesterday, and many places across the south saw temperatures in the low 20s. Today will be that little bit cooler, both with lower temperatures and a keen northeasterly breeze. So we have got plenty of sunshine. I think we're still feeling warm where we get the brightness, but there will be a little bit more cloud building for some into the afternoon. That breeze noticeable for the Isle of Wight, the far south coast, and I think for all of us, a cooler, breezier day with highs of around 19, perhaps the odd 20 degrees. Through tonight, it stays quite breezy, clear skies as well. I think it will be chillier than last night, perhaps a bit of cloud feeding in to the far east, and temperatures could get down to around 5 or 6 degrees. So more cloud to begin tomorrow. I think there will be some decent spells of sunshine. Still breezy though, but the best of the sunshine into the afternoon. Temperatures do start to climb, so most places reaching 20, perhaps 21 degrees.
No major travel problems to let you know about so far this morning. I'm back with you in half an hour. Now back to Nina and Roger for the headlines at 7. See you a bit later on.
Radio 1's Big Weekend, live in Dundee. Lewis Capaldi. Wet Leg. Arlo Parks. The Jonas Brothers, and many more. Let's take you closer to the music. Radio 1's Big Weekend. Watch now on BBC iPlayer. Listen on Sounds.
Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Roger Johnson and Nina Warhouse.
Good morning. Our headlines today. Supporters of Turkey's President Erdogan celebrate into the night as he wins 5 more years in power. But his rival claims the election was unfair.
ITV confirms This Morning will air today as normal after days of controversy over Philip Schofield's affair with a younger colleague.
In sport, agony and ecstasy on the last day of the Premier League. Everton are safe, but Leicester and Leeds are relegated, with fans waking up to life outside of English football's top tier.
Kenilworth Road may only seat around 10,000 fans, but it will be hosting Premier League football next season, and this morning an open-top bus will leave from the stadium and start Luton Town's parade celebrations.
Good morning. This week, high pressure remains firmly in charge, so the weather will remain settled. There'll be a fair bit of sunshine around, a bit more cloud coming in from the North Sea at times, and a cool breeze across the southeast and also the south of the country. I'll have all the details later in the programme.
Hello there, it's Monday the 29th of May. Our top story today, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has secured another 5 years in power after winning the country's most important election in years.
Mr. Erdogan appealed for national unity as he celebrated victory last night over his opponent, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who declared the result was unfair. Our correspondent, Aruna Iyengar, has this report.
Ecstatic Erdogan supporters outside the presidential palace in Ankara last night. Earlier in the day, the president had sung to the crowd and recited a poem. This Erdogan supporter says, "Bye-bye, Mr. Kemal. Thank God Islam has won."
We are very happy, full of joy. I can't even contain myself. I thank God.
Big celebrations, but they don't show that this was the biggest challenge to Mr. Erdogan's authority in years. He became Prime Minister in 2003, later becoming President. To build up that position, he has stifled all opposition. His non-religious rival, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, says the election was unfair. Mr. Erdogan had one big advantage, almost total control of the media. Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu's CHP party had campaigned against crackdowns on dissent and for a return to an independent justice system and parliamentary democracy. A sombre mood here as the results came out.
I am really sad. I think the country is heading towards a darkness. I think it is not looking good for the future of our children and grandchildren.
He left the CHP headquarters in tears. World leaders have been congratulating Mr. Erdogan. He enjoys a big role internationally, a friend to countries in the East while being a member of NATO. He's also put himself forward as a mediator in the Russia-Ukraine war. But it's back home where divisions may be hard to heal. Inflation is high and rebuilding cities after the earthquakes in February are a massive challenge. Mr. Erdogan promised in his victory speech to return Syrian refugees back to their homeland. Anti-immigrant feeling in Turkey has been growing. October will see the centenary of the Turkish Republic. Mr. Erdogan says he's confident about the future. Others are less convinced. Aruna Iyengar, BBC News.
Let's speak with our reporter Özge Özdemir. He's in Istanbul for us this morning. So a significant character who's known globally. What does this mean at home in Turkey?
Erdogan has been building up his discourse upon national security, and he has been saying that he has been promising making Turkey much more better and stronger in the international diplomacy. On the other hand, the opposition has been saying that he has been an authoritarian leader, and opposition candidate Kılıçdaroğlu has been promising more democratic and just country, and also to end the economic crisis. Erdogan is just 5 points ahead of Kılıçdaroğlu, and we can see that there is a divided country right now. The values at these two sides are not in the same line, so it's going to be an interesting 5 years for Turkish politics, also for Turkish economy.
Okay, thank you.
The Metropolitan Police says that it will stop attending emergency calls involving mental health incidents from September, unless there is an immediate threat to life. The BBC understands that the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, wrote to Health and Social Care Services last week, outlining the need for officers to concentrate on their primary role of fighting crime. The Met says that in total, forces across England and Wales are spending just under 1 million hours a year waiting in hospitals with people who need urgent care.
7 men will appear in court today, charged with the attempted murder of senior Northern Irish police officer John Caldwell. Detective Chief Inspector Caldwell sustained life-changing injuries after he was shot outside a sports complex in Omagh, County Tyrone, in February.
Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, has once again been struck by a wave of air attacks overnight, with more than 40 drones and missiles shot down by the city's air defences. That's been live to be by diplomatic correspondent James Landale is there again for us this morning. And James, this is the second night where the city has come under significant attack.
Yeah, another night, another set of airstrikes. We think this is now the 15th time Kyiv has been struck by a pretty substantial airstrike since this month. So we're looking pretty much one every other day, and that is definitely a more sustained targeting of the capital by the Russian forces than we've seen for some months. And it's pretty clear why they're doing it. They're trying not just to sort of damage key bits of critical national infrastructure, but they're also trying to damage and deplete Ukraine's air defences before Ukraine launches its own counter-offensive. In other words, it wants Ukraine to use up all of those munitions and missiles that it uses to protect this city night after night. So far, we've heard, as ever, reports of some damage to buildings. As you said, 40 missiles and drones were shot out of the sky. That means there's debris that falls down onto the ground. But according to the city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, there are as yet no reports of casualties. So yeah, the city continues. This weekend, it celebrated the anniversary of its foundation more than 15 centuries ago. There were loads of people out in the streets. We went to chat to some of them, and I have to say they were all being pretty resilient about it.
James, thank you very much indeed. James Landale, live in Kyiv, 2 successive nights of aerial bombardment.
Onto a day of heroics and heartbreak in the Premier League as the season came to a dramatic end. So some relief for Everton fans everywhere. They survived the drop with a 1-0 win over Bournemouth, but a dismal weekend for Leicester and Leeds, who were both relegated.
Yes, many were quick to share their reaction on social media, including the former Leicester player Gary Lineker, who said, "Absolutely gutted, but glad it's Everton. Have a lot of love for that great football club. Of course, he played for Everton as well. Congratulations."
The Leeds goalkeeper, meanwhile, Joel Robles, tweeted, "We want to say sorry. We didn't complete the objective, and this is very painful. I'm proud to be part of this fantastic club this season. Thank you for all of your support in the good and the bad moments."
Well, outside Goodison Park, Everton fans could breathe a sigh of relief. Keep an eye out as you listen to them for the mum who really does love her club at the end of a nerve-wracking afternoon.
We are happy, of course we're happy, but it's more relief than anything.
I went to Kenya with Everton community this year. That's how much I love my club, right? And they have just rewarded me.
Jenny Baines!
My kids.
We couldn't even imagine going down to I can't describe it, Anthony. You've got to be an Evertonian to know.
The whole day was like a build-up of stress, but at the end it was just relief, I think. It was just
like that.
No, it was like that.
Made up. I think that we've done it today, but we've done it. Up the toppies.
This has been the longest week ever, and that just can't happen again. I've looked at it, it's awful. Awful.
Oh, down to the last moments, wasn't it?
Did you really mean that, Mum?
Mummy.
Passion, real passion.
I'm sure she did mean it. Lots more sport coming up this morning. Jane will have a full rundown of the action from yesterday.
Yeah, the day before, of course, Luton Town secured their place in the top.
Letting will be there. Good morning to you. A lovely sunny day for the knees.
To go back 15 years, when this club almost went bankrupt, they were in administration. They had lots of point deductions as well. Just 10 years ago, of course, they got to the Premier League, didn't they, Roger and Nina, on the weekend when they beat Coventry City 6-5 on penalties in the most dramatic of fashion at Wembley. Rob Edwards' men getting the business done, and it means so much to this town. And as you say, today, in just a few in the
fans in the
7 a little later this morning. This morning will air on ITV. as normal as the network insists to access the show in the wake of Philip Schofield's resignation.
Well, our correspondent Sancha Berg is outside Television Centre in London. Morning to you. Many people will be tuning in this morning. What more can you tell us?
What I can tell you is that TV has said this morning will be brought to you morning with Dermot O'Leary and Alison Hammond. Of course, Holly Willoughby is away for half. So we'll have to see what on Twitter last amidst his concern to ITV, his concerns. They've been investigated tonight. So a lot of questions being asked about the programme, about its direction, about who knew what when. For example, ITV said that it investigated reports, rumours of the relationship between Felix Schofield and the younger colleague in 2020 and didn't find any basis for action. But of course, many, many people will be repeating these questions as the show is broadcast this morning.
Okay, Sancha, thank you very much.
Authorities in Venice are investigating after part of the city's central waterway appeared to turn fluorescent green. Samples have been collected to determine how it happened, but some social media users have said it's reminiscent of a stunt in 1968 when some of the Grand Canal was dyed green to raise awareness of ecological issues. A tiny kitten was rescued after spending 3 small cameras to identify the exact location.
It's 7:15. It's a bank holiday, so let's see what the weather is doing. You may have plans to get out and about during the day on the bank holiday. Carol, morning to you. How's it looking?
It's looking not too bad, Roger, today for many of us. Good morning. If you're going out early, worth bearing in mind, for a lot of us, it's a chilly start to the day, but it's going to be mostly dry. It will linger close to the east coast, but there's also a bit more cloud. But in that strong sunshine, don't forget, UV levels today are going to be high, almost across the board. But it will feel cool, be quite deceptive, because even though we'll have the sunshine, it will still be a cool Scotland, and through the night you'll find more cloud coming in from the North Sea, drifting farther west. It's going to be a chilly night where we've got clear skies with a touch of frost parts of Scotland, northern England, and also northern of the week. Roger and Nina, the weather does remain.
It's always a surprise when you get nothing, though, isn't it? I think.
It just completely burst my bubble.
Well, maybe it's good to measure expectations.
No doubt about it.
Thank you.
You have been warned if you're watching. It's 16 minutes past 7 now. We've talked a lot about rising food costs recently because of high inflation. Lots of people are looking for ways to cut their grocery bills.
Yeah, so the government's discussing plans for supermarkets to bring in a voluntary price cap for certain household goods. You may have heard this. We mentioned it on the programme a couple of times yesterday, and it's been in some of the papers. Ministers, they say the talks are in early stages. So let's just have a quick look at how prices have risen in recent years, as if we need them.
Well, this is it. The cost of 2 pints of milk in April this year was £1.30. Now that's 33% higher than the same time last year. Every time I pick it up, I'm surprised.
A loaf of bread has also gone up. It's risen 28% over the same period, now about £1.39.
The cost of a dozen eggs has gone up by more than a third, 37%, up to £3.29, and they are just the staples. What can be done then to help cut our food costs? We're joined by Teresa Wickham, a former Safeway director and advisor to Sainsbury's. Good morning. It would be an unusual move were a price cap introduced. How would it work?
Well, I think it's a very peculiar idea for 2 reasons. And I think despite the new competitive industry there is, it's always seeking to give value, but it's highly competitive. Retailers keep one eye on the price the whole time. And in fact, the price of butter, bread and eggs, I think, or maybe meat, has actually come down. And if you go into the big supermarkets now, you'll see prices which they say are competitive with Aldi and Lidl, the big discounters. But you'll also see if you have a loyalty card, you get a lower price as a shopper. And that's about locking people into shopping in that particular chain.
So, I mean, you're right.
Milk, for example, has come down slightly in the last month or so. If the price cap were to be introduced, is the implication you're saying there, when you compare it, for example, to pricing on the continent, that there just aren't those margins for supermarkets to absorb it?
No, there aren't. And in fact, I see how, well, in fact, they say it's in France, it's not in some of the major supermarkets in France. It's a little blue sign. And psychologically, if you put that on, people will say, well, why couldn't they do us before? And look, pension funds, they're public companies, you see. That's the difference. And again, Number 10 doesn't seem to understand it. Our big retailers, particularly the big two, they take a longer thing about their strategy. They're prepared to lose money. So it's one of the things, I mean, people know why prices have gone up. And as soon as they can get them down, they will do, without sacrificing too much of their margins. I mean, the bigger problems, cucumbers and tomatoes, well, they weren't there in Europe because they were paying a better.
But the bottom line for consumers is they're walking into supermarkets or smaller retailers having to make some really big decisions about staples. If this isn't the answer, what is?
I think there's two things the government can do. And when I first heard about it, I was quite surprised. They know via people who are on universal credit and things like that, so everybody benefits it. But they could target those people who've got problems, they could do it that way. And then the other thing was that, in fact, the Chancellor was extremely sensible when he called people in and he said, look, could you look at your pricing on your labels? Because it's very confusing for consumers. Price per kilo or price per thing, they don't do the same thing. And it took 5 years to get a sort of a good overall industry standard for nutrition, so you know which is sugar, fats, etc., like that, the traffic light system. And what they need to do is say to the industry, look, get your act together, a big thing of milk, but it might be actually, those are simple things. They cost money because of packaging, but they don't really cost money. It's much, much more complicated, the food chain, than people think about it. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say thank you for that clarity, because people don't necessarily
people think about it. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say thank you for that clarity, because people don't necessarily understand that a measure like that couldn't necessarily be imposed overnight, and obviously somebody will have to pay for it. Can retail expert, thank you for your time this morning.
It's just approaching 7:25. Do you know how to enjoy yourself without damaging the environment? Hopefully.
Well, you've got an unlikely teacher in the form of Shaun the sheep. The popular children's character is the new champion of Natural England's Countryside Code. Let's take a look.
Let's talk to Johnny Januszewski. He's Natural England's campaign manager. He's here. You must be cock-a-hoop to have Shaun the sheep on board.
Oh, yeah, this is fantastic. Just seeing it here. We worked really hard on this campaign, so it's nice to finally bring it to life, and hopefully we get to teach people all about the Countryside Code.
So who had the idea to approach Ardman to get him on, get Shaun on?
So we'd worked with Ardman before. So we worked on a Creature Comforts campaign in 2004, and it was really successful, if people can remember at home. So about a year ago, we talked about working with Ardman again and seeing what we could do around the Countryside Code. And then thankfully at the start of this year, we picked up that conversation again. And really from there, Ardman are a fantastic partner, very unique in this space, really exciting people to work with. So yeah, the Shaun the Sheep partnership came about, and we're delighted to actually see it on TV.
And do you know what? It works because they're cute and cosy, But I do remember Creature Comforts, and I remember the messaging of it. So there's something about that simplicity that actually resonates with the messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And evidence that we have at Natural England, so we have a number of different tools that looks at evidence of what we do. So the Children's People and Nature Survey is a key example of what we've used in a tool where we thought, actually, we need to make a bit of work. So we looked at 82% of young people said they wanted to do more to protect the environment. 85% of them just enjoy being outdoors altogether. But actually what we found is that the Countryside Code amongst that demographic of people had dropped, particularly from the last campaign that we did. So people weren't as aware of the messaging that we're trying to teach today. So that's why, again, Shaun the Sheep is just a fantastic ambassador to that and a brilliant part.
I suppose the key thing, anything that says Countryside Code to young people sounds a bit formal, a bit stuffy. It's how, I mean, and I appreciate this is all about trying to translate it, but just if people didn't pick it up from the little film that we showed, just what is the Countryside Code?
Yeah, so the code is people's guides to the countryside, urban park, and waterways. So really, what we want to try and do is make sure that when you do go outside into nature, you respect it, you protect it, and enjoy it, and that's the strapline that we have. So it's all around making sure that we look after the countryside, so we take care of it, but then also actually trying to enjoy it. So there's a lot of physical benefits to the countryside, there's a lot of mental health benefits to the countryside, and that's really where we've done this campaign to try and make sure that people can go out there and enjoy it, and particularly children and young people. Up on that.
Yeah, stuff like we're just showing them now. There's litter. We're just seeing this one's about water.
Yeah, and this is Ardman's, iconic style that really brings it to life, and that's what we've been so excited to do. So, with the Countryside Code, we want to make sure that we do reach different generations, different people, and I think you can see here from the video it's been done spectacularly well.
Oh, and here's the messaging on dogs, which is.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are about with the dog, so keep dogs under control, keep them on a lead, and there's livestock, there's wildlife that are outside. So, and then the message in Binnet, which is a really message as part of the countryside.
That doesn't just apply in the countryside.
Yeah, so it's fantastic.
They're really good.
And what's this one? This one is.
So this is about being considerate to the outdoors. So while you are outdoors, there are people that are working outside, farmers, land managers, and we do get this a lot from our partners and stakeholders. So it's about being careful when you take care, and there's paths to follow. So really, it's just trying to make sure that people. So we've developed a number of different assets to really get them involved with the code. And there are, like you said, there's many different messages, but I think the really key ones are making sure that you plan. We want everyone to be able to enjoy nature in the way that it is. So if you are taking a picnic, take a litter home with you.
Yeah.
You've got a dog, bag it, bin it, and they're the sort of key messages that we try and go out with.
Okay, very quick question, because you've gone behind the scenes. What's Shaun the Sheep like in real life?
Oh well, the team are incredible. We visited them a few weeks ago, and
Johnny Januszewski is Natural England's campaign manager.
We've got a big smile on all our faces this morning. And at 7:29, it's time to get the news, the trouble, and the weather where you are.
Hi, very good morning from South Today at Breakfast. I'm Edward Salt. Detectives on the Isle of Wight are continuing to question 3 people this morning on suspicion of murder following a stabbing in Ryde. Emergency services were called to Park Road in the early hours of Sunday morning. A man in his 30s had been seriously injured and died on his way to hospital. 2 27-year-old men from Sandown and Ryde and a 24-year-old woman from Shanklin have been arrested. Residents have spent a second night in intimidation after fire at apartments in Basingstoke on Saturday. 80 firefighters from across Hampshire dealt with the blaze in Oakridge Road. Around 30 properties were affected. Investigation way into the cause of the fire. The housing association Vivid is providing funds for tenants to buy emergency supplies, while the council says it plans to work with voluntary partners to set up a donation scheme to help displaced families. People heading to the Dorset coast this week during the school half-term break are being urged to leave only footprints. Around 2,000 tonnes of rubbish were collected by Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council from its miles of sandy beaches last year. The council's appealing to visitors to help cut the cost of daily clean-up by taking all located bins for waste and recycling. Water bottle filling stations along the seafront have already helped cut the number of discarded plastic bottles. Now, some of Britain's best climbers are in the New Forest this weekend. Southern Tree Climbing Competition. Every competitor has to be qualified, so entrants are all trained tree surgeons or arborists. They took on a series of challenges based on speed, navigating their way of Britain in the European and World Championships, which are later this year.
It's really challenging to be fast but not scrappy. So it's almost a case of being slow and smooth is actually faster.
It keeps you very fit. You know, you have to be very agile. You have to be very sharp-minded also.
I love climbing. I love trees. I love all the people, the support. It's like having a big campfire, just climbing trees. It's brilliant.
Let's get your bank holiday Monday weather forecast now with B. Tucker.
Hi, good morning. We had the warmest day of the year yesterday, and many places across the south saw temperatures in the low 20s. Today will be that little bit cooler, both with lower temperatures and a keen northeasterly breeze. So we have got plenty of sunshine. I think we're still feeling warm where we get the brightness, but there will be a little bit more cloud building for some into the afternoon. That breeze noticeable for the Isle of Wight, the far south coast, and I think for all of us, a cooler, breezier day with highs of around 19, perhaps the odd 20 degrees. Through tonight, it stays quite breezy, clear skies as well. I think it will be chillier than last night, perhaps a bit of cloud feeding in to the far east, and temperatures could get down to around 5 or 6 degrees.
That's it for now. Then I'm back with you just before 8 o'clock. Join me then if you can. In the meantime, back to Nina and Roger. Bye for now.
Hello, you're watching Breakfast with Roger Johnson and Nina Warhurst.
Morning, 7:32. Let's catch up on all the sport. It's a busy bank holiday weekend right across.
Win themselves, and Leeds just, well, hoping for a miracle, really. As it turned out, Everton did win. So a frantic and survived. Then looks back on a dramatic day for fans across the country.
Leicester are relegated.
For two huge clubs, their greatest fear is now reality. Just 7 years ago, Leicester City were champions. Now the Foxes face up to relegation. They go down with Leeds United, whose 3-year stay has now they just had to beat Bournemouth to stay there again.
Just gone again here, tipped over by Travers.
But at this stage, no game is straightforward. At half-time, it was 0-0, and at that stage, they were down. But in the second half, Everton exhaled.
I come to Decore, well hit! Oh, yes! Oh, what a strike from Abdoulaye Doucouré that is!
On this nervous afternoon, Abdoulaye Doucouré smashed through the tension. Everton had the goal they needed, and as Leicester irrelevant.
I think we deserved it because we've not played well. Them players are not playing for this
Oh,
club.
no,
They're not playing for the shirts.
Devastated. He's been in tears. But your team's your team.
You know what? We'll rebuild, and then we'll get.
For Leeds, their last chance was a long shot. They had to beat Spurs just to stay in contention. Instead, Harry Kane cut them off. Leeds have changed their coach twice just this year. Even Sam Allardyce couldn't save this dark season.
Yeah, it's been very disappointing. I'm very disappointed for the fans and you know what they've seen. Probably not just in my short time, but for most of the season, they've supported us. They're very entitled to show their disapproval.
Everton brought in Sean Dyche as manager. Now on the last day, he led them to safety.
And Everton have survived again!
To get it done this year is progression. Now we've got to progress further, recruit well. That's questionable over the years, not from me, from many people. How can you recruit? What money's available? We don't know. All them things, they're not for this moment in time, but trust me, I've got it all there because I've been living it for 4 months and I have been living it, by the way.
At times this year for Everton, it had looked bleak, and this is the second straight season where they've saved it at the end. For the team who've been in this league since 1954, it still means so much just to stay in it. Joe Linsky, BBC News.
Well, a day of reckoning awaits for either Sheffield Wednesday or Barnsley. Taylor Charters scoring the decisive spot kick for Carlisle, sending them into League One that isn't at the expense of Stockport. Incredibly, Carlisle were second favourites to be relegated to the National League at the very start of the season and had also never been promoted via the playoffs. In Scotland, Celtic ended their season on a high with a win in the Women's Scottish Cup final after narrowly missing out on claiming the league title last week. It was a tight first half, but 2 goals in quick succession in the second, including that header from Claire O'Riordan, gave Celtic the victory. It is the first time that the match has been held at Scotland's National Stadium, Hampden Park. Champagne on the lens there. It sets a great example of the growth of women's football, as Captain Kelly Clark said afterwards.
It's a dream come true. I've watched Celtic men do that so many times in my 10 years at Celtic. To do it and to be down in history with such a special group of players again just feels amazing. And it's amazing that there's a crowd that includes lots of little girls that can now see what they can do in Scotland. This year for women's football has been
was knocked out by Australian wildcard Tanasi Kokonai. Max Verstappen dominated a wet Monaco Grand Prix, leading from start to finish. This track to be the rain added an element of jeopardy on the straight track, causing multiple slips and slides. However, Verstappen stayed strong, and Fernando Alonso second and Esteban Ocon. Now, while the Monaco Grand Prix was fairly uneventful, that cannot be said for motor racing's other big event, the Indy 500. Fans there were very fortunate not to be severely injured or even killed after this crash ended in a wheel breaking free and flying over the fences that were supposed to protect spectators. Luckily, it cleared the grandstand and landed on a car park, leaving a big. Titans will be crowned champions as they currently top the league table. Now, 14-year-old British skateboarder Sky Brown has won gold at a World Tour event in Argentina. Brown took first place in the Olympic qualifying competition for the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. If you remember, Brown won bronze at the Tokyo Olympics. And here she produced a stunning display to win the trophy in San Juan ahead of Australia's Ruby True. Lovely to see that delight there from.
Even harder, and yeah, I just had the best time on my
unforgiving motor spins in the world, the ultimate test for both riders and machines. Well, it begins today, and this year's races will again see riders from across. First practice and qualifying is later on, with a revised race programme for this year, seeing the number of races increase from 8 to 10. And finally, let's leave you with a story of putting your here in the Pink Leaders jersey, but rather than wallow, he decided to help lead his friend Mark Cavendish in the white here to victory on yesterday's final stage in Rome. Cavendish was short of teammates towards the end, and despite riding for a different team, Thomas helped to position Cavendish for the final sprint, and he went on to claim his 70th. Lovely to see all those
Isn't that
going around.
nice?
Doesn't always happen, eh?
Put your feet up and
I would.
having a glass of something cold. Let's have a look at the weather, shall we, this morning? Before we see Carol, have a look at that.
It's summer and now it's here. It's all the more for appreciating, isn't it? Absolutely, Nina. Yes, good morning, everybody. This morning, if you're at the moment, 3 degrees. The rest of the day for most of us, it's going to be dry, it's going to be sunny, summer-like, as Nina alluded to there. And some of us will have a little bit of cloud to start with, but that's going to break up. And what you'll find is it will brighten up across the was yesterday. Top temperatures getting one more like round about, draped around the north and west of Scotland. And if you follow it round, you can see how through the night it comes in across eastern. Still this brisk wind across the far southeastern English Channel, and these are our temperatures in towns and cities. But in rural areas under clear skies, temperatures could get pretty close to free west, but you can see this cloud again coming in from the North Sea overnight, retreats a little bit towards the east. Some of it will linger though, and across the southeast. And 20. Like say, oh, do you know what, Roger? I do have a life. It doesn't sound like I do, but I do. So no, I don't do that.
Thank you, Carol. She just knows where the best places are. I bet. It was since I marmalised that place in Cheshire. It's the Cope Brook Shire Horse Centre that we have that beautiful weather fixed on.
The horse farm.
The horse farm. Let's have a look at some of the great bank
In South Yorkshire. Look at the colours, it's just gorgeous. You only get that because of the rain, you see. We should be grateful for the rain.
Jill and Debbie have been making the most of the sunshine today.
Look at these beautiful natural colours on holiday in the Cotswolds. It looks Cotswoldsy, doesn't it?
Maisie the Labradoodle has been finding a little bit of shade.
Be nice to get out there a little bit later on. It's just gone 7:45. Now, it's something we all do 24 hours a day.
We need to do.
Yeah, but how often do you think about the way that you breathe?
Well, many experts say that it's better to breathe through your nose than through your mouth. But recently, some people have been putting tape over their mouths to try to change the habit. And that has been described, not unsurprisingly, as dangerous. Tim Muffet has been finding out a little bit more about this.
We all do it around 20,000 times a day without thinking.
Inhale. And exhale.
But Laura is a breathing instructor and believes that focusing on your breath can change your life.
Nasal breathing involves breathing in and out of your nose instead of your mouth. I've seen better sleeping, better digestion, improved athletic performance. 4, 5.
Next to the River Loon in Lancashire, Laura's hosting a breathing workshop.
We want to try and keep our shoulders really relaxed, and we want to really use this diaphragm muscle.
The hairs in our nose help filter out pollutants such as dust, pollen or bacteria before they reach our lungs. Now that's one benefit of nasal breathing upon which everyone agrees. But Laura believes other advantages are too often overlooked.
It's harder to breathe through your nose. There's less oxygen gets in. But we've got to remember that when we breathe in through our mouth, like this, we're not necessarily getting any more oxygen into the blood. A lot of that oxygen just ends up being exhaled anyway. When you breathe through the nose, it has a tendency to come into the cells.
There's been a growing interest in nasal breathing on social media and a rise in the number of breathing instructors like Laura.
If you live somewhere like here, where there's 3 national parks and it's very hilly, you need to be able to walk up and down hill. By breathing through my nose, I can keep going for longer, I can regulate it, and I don't get to that.
It makes you realise how much you rely on breathing.
David is an experienced runner. He's training for an Ironman triathlon.
We're going to place it fully over the mouth.
So given that he's already very fit, he's going to try something that some claim can improve athletic performance. He's putting tape over his mouth.
They're probably reducing their ventilation by about 20%. Now, ventilation requires muscular energy. It requires the intercostals and the diaphragm and the heart. Now, if you lessen the work for those muscles, that energy can be utilised for the actual running.
When we look at actually what a good breath is, we actually see the movement occur across the abdomen and the ribcage at the same time.
Professor John Dickinson runs the respiratory clinic at the University of Kent. He's worked with some of the world's top athletes and agrees
An athlete to take their mouth. I think potentially it's actually can impact their performance quite a bit, because we know that it's once you get to a certain level of exercise, it's actually really hard to solely breathe through your nose.
On social media, there have been many videos of people being encouraged to tape their mouths at night while sleeping to make them breathe through their nose at night. What's your view on that?
I think it's actually really dangerous. If you're finding that you struggle to breathe through your nose at night, I really encourage you to get in touch with your GP and maybe get a referral to an ENT specialist or a sleep specialist, because they are going to know the best techniques and the best kind of treatments for you, rather than taping your mouth.
Back in Lancashire, David has no intention of taping his mouth in bed. But how's he found it whilst training?
Right, how was that? How are you finding it?
Yeah, that was okay. Well, I feel like I'm breathing deeper. If I'd have run breathing through my mouth, the recovery time would have been longer than what it is now, because I feel like I'm back to normal with my breath.
David might be won over, but others aren't, and stress that seeing experienced runners with their mouths taped up doesn't mean it's a good idea for everyone. Tim Muffet, BBC News.
Gosh, we're all thinking about how we're breathing now, aren't we? And I've realised that I barely use my nose at all. We're joined by journalist and science presenter, Dr. Michael Mosley. Morning to you. Are you a nose breather?
I try to be, yes. I mean, I do a podcast series for Radio 4 called Just One Thing, which I wrote a book about. And one thing we've looked at is breathing. And it's turned out to be the most popular podcast I ever did, downloaded by more than 10 million people. So people are really interested in their breathing.
Tricky to change the habit though, because as we were watching that report, I was thinking it through and I almost went into panic mode because it feels difficult to shift towards that.
Yes, it is, but it is, as the expert was pointing out there, important to breathe through your nose, because if you breathe through your nose, then the air is going to your lungs, which is a good thing, and breathing through your nose also moisturizes the air, so it goes down into your lungs. It does a surprising thing, which we discovered on Just One Thing, is that it leads to the release of nitric oxide, which is a gas, expansion of the lungs, and you actually absorb more oxygen. So it turns out that it leads you to a bit more oxygen than they showed. They inhale. They showed they stuck them in a brain scanner and they asked them either to breathe through their mouth or through their nose, and they found they performed. It's really important in children to identify mouth breathers because they can develop complications. But yeah, if you wake up and your mouth is really dry, it could suggest that you have been doing a lot of mouth breathing during the night, and it could also suggest that you have sleep apnea, which is quite allergies, or it could be got sinusitis. Children are a host of breathing through their mouth on through their nose. But yeah, it turns out that breathing is why I think you can consciously breathing through, indeed, the lots of exercises you can do, which show
Question.
Doing it, or indeed parents, actually breathe through your nose. As I said, try and get rid of the reasons why you might not be, because you should, if you like, almost instinctively breathing through your nose, apart from when you're running and you basically need to get more oxygen in, and therefore you're going to be going. Most of the time, you should be breathing through the nose. Yogic exercises are a very good way of retraining you. Some people get out of the mouth, and they need to get back into the habit. With learning to breathe through your nose, we looked at one of the sort of health benefits in terms of reducing stress from doing breathing exercises. There's a very good one which is recommended by the NHS, which is called 4-2-4, and you breathe into your nose for count to 4. Hold it for 2, and then breathe out to your mouth to count of 4. And if you do that at 2, that really relaxes you. It slows down your heart rate. And I found it brilliant. I find it difficult to sleep. Then that is another good form of breathing exercise you might have a go at.
So watches, like my watch has got probably have access to that kind of training you've just talked about.
Absolutely, it's becoming increasingly recognised as an important way of controlling your health, controlling your stress, and things like that. And as you say, I mean, you said at the beginning, it's something we do all the time. We don't think about it. We don't really think it's terribly important. But modulating your breath, people have sort of yogics have known this for a very long time, and science is just beginning to catch up.
Dr. Mosley, thank you so much. I'll be looking out for your podcast, Just One Thing. That sounds like a really... and not just because of the breathing.
And a very good morning to you from South Tyne, Edward Salt. Detectives on the Isle of Wight are continuing to question 3 people on suspicion of doing a stabbing in Ryde. Emergency services were called to Park Road in the early hours of Sunday morning. A man injured and died on his way to hospital. 2 27-year-old men from Sandton and a 24-year-old woman from Shanklin, New Forest this weekend for the Southern Tree Climbing Competition. Every competitor has to be qualified, so entrants are all trained surgeons or climbing competition. Every competitor has to be qualified, entrants are all trained tree surgeons or arborists. Challenges, speed, rope throwing, and navigating their way around. The winners go on to represent Britain in the European and World Championships later this year. Your bank holiday weather forecast then today will start mostly sunny. A few patches of low cloud may build in during the afternoon, but plenty of time will redevelop later in the day. A cooler day though, but plenty of sunshine will redevelop later in the day. A cooler day though, with moderate to fresh winds.
There's risky. I'll swing for it. No one else.
The Gallows on BBC Two and iPlayer.
Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Roger Johnson and Nina Waters.
Good morning. Our headlines today. Supporters of Turkey's President Erdogan celebrate into the night as he wins 5 more years in power, but his rival claims the election was unfair.
ITV News this morning will air today as normal after days of controversy over Philip Schofield's affair with a younger colleague.
Days out this half term, take the young one. Dramatic last day of the Premier League, but their victory means Leicester join Leeds in relegation, with both sets of fans devastated at the drop.
So the Premier this week remains settled. Today it's a charge North Sea that will break up through the day. Cloud draped across the north and west of Scotland, but in between.
It's Monday, the 29th of May. Good morning. Our main story today. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has secured another 5 years in power after winning the country's most important election in years.
Mr. Erdogan appealed for unity as he celebrated victory last night over his opponent Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who declared that the result was unfair. Our correspondent Ina Iyengar has reports.
Erdogan supporters celebrations, but they don't show that this was the biggest challenge to Mr. Erdogan's authority. In Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu says the election was unfair. Mr. Erdogan had one big advantage, almost control. A somber mood here as the results came out.
I am really sad.
Also put himself forward as a mediator in the Russia-Ukraine war. Be hard to heal. Inflation is high.